Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Angelica Graswald. On the evening of April 19, 2015, Angelica Graswald and Vincent Villafor went kayaking. Both enjoyed an active lifestyle and outdoor activities, with kayaking being one of their favorites. Their relationship, which had grown over the years, was strengthened by their shared passion. That day, the couple decided to kayak across the Hudson River to Bannerman Island. They enjoyed their time there, but around 7 p.m., they decided it was time to head home. However, the wind picked up on the Hudson River, creating waves about a meter high, which posed a significant challenge to their kayak. Despite the risk, Angelica and Vincent decided to turn back because they did not have the necessary equipment to stay overnight on the island. Initially, they managed to navigate the strong waves, but as they reached the other shore, Vincent's kayak began to fill with water. The situation was worsened by the fact that Vincent was not wearing a life jacket and the water was extremely cold. In April, the river had not yet warmed up, and darkness was approaching, which posed a significant risk. Vincent shouted to Angelica to call 911 as he was already in the water and struggling to stay afloat. At approximately 7:30 p.m. on April 19, 2015, Angelica called 911, sounding desperate. She explained that she was on the Hudson River with her fiancé, who had fallen into the water. She said that he did not have any life-saving equipment and that the strong winds and waves made it impossible for her to swim to him. Angelica was extremely concerned, emphasizing that Vincent was being swept away by the current and was in danger of drowning, and she urgently called for help. When rescuers arrived, Vincent was no longer visible from the shore. The rescuers were shocked that the young couple had chosen to kayak in such harsh conditions. Angelica was cold, and they helped her warm up while they began searching for Vincent. The situation appeared to be a tragic accident. Angelica sat on the shore and cried, unable to find Vincent. She was devastated by his disappearance. The couple had planned their wedding, and now their dreams of a future together seemed shattered. The police spoke to her to gather details of what had happened, but she was in shock, making it difficult for her to calm down. Vincent's relatives and friends claimed that he was extremely skilled and knew how to handle waves of all sizes. The circumstances surrounding Vincent's disappearance were so strange that several people reported the couple's relationship to the police. Their relationship had recently deteriorated, and there had been numerous reports about it. As a result, the police felt compelled to conduct a thorough investigation. However, in order to reach any firm conclusions, they needed to locate Vincent's body and his kayak. The police then interviewed Angelica again. Angelica agreed to come to the station for questioning, unaware of how much this conversation would affect her life. At 35, Angelica was an attractive woman. Originally from Latvia, she had always sought work opportunities abroad for better prospects. Although she had been married and divorced twice, she had never given up on her dream of a new life. Eventually, luck was on her side when she secured a job as a nanny in the United States. This job suited her perfectly, as Angelica was kind, caring, and calm, which allowed her to bond well with children. During this time, Angelica met Vincent, who was also twice divorced and 46 years old. Vincent had built a successful career in the construction industry and was quite wealthy. Some acquaintances believed that she was using Vincent to secure her position in the United States by marrying an American. Vincent was generous and loved to throw parties. A few weeks after they met, Angelica moved into Vincent's home in Kips Bay, New York. Their relationship quickly progressed, and they began to discuss marriage and children. While Angelica looked for a new job, Vincent worked to provide for her needs. Their life was stable until a tragic accident occurred. Vincent and Angelica attended a party with friends the day before the tragic kayaking accident. During the party, Angelica left early, saying she was not feeling well. She spent most of the evening alone and had little interaction with others. Vincent's friends observed some tension between the couple, noting a minor argument, but nothing serious. The next morning, they met again. That evening, Vincent shared his kayaking plans with his friends, but they were unable to change his mind due to his stubbornness. Despite the cold weather, the next day, Vincent suggested they make up and go on vacation to the Hudson, and Angelica agreed immediately. The couple had planned to take photos at Bannerman Castle, which was located in the middle of the river. Angelica had brought some nice outfits for the photo shoot. By 4 p.m., they had reached the riverbank and were ready to leave for the island. Angelica noticed that the wind had picked up considerably. It was cold, and rain was in the forecast, but that didn't stop them. The couple enjoyed extreme sports and felt confident because they had paddled in similar conditions before. Angelica's timeline was confirmed by the photos they took. She mentioned that they had had a few beers beforehand. They both drank enough to enjoy themselves while ensuring they were sober when they got home to drive. During questioning, Angelica told the police that she knew there was a problem with the drain plug on Vincent's kayak. He needed to replace it, but she did not check it before they left. The journey to the castle was difficult, and Vincent often passed her. The pair made good use of the large waves. However, on the way back, Angelica noticed that Vincent had suddenly fallen far behind. The waves grew higher, and suddenly he started calling out to her, asking her to contact rescuers. When Angelica turned around, she saw that Vincent's kayak was taking on water and starting to sink. Vincent struggled to stay afloat while the current carried Angelica toward the shore, making it impossible for her to return to help him. She had no choice but to go to shore to call for rescue. By then, Vincent had disappeared from sight. They searched for Vincent all night, and the next day, a search operation continued. Divers scoured the river for his body, while boats equipped with sonar scanned the water. Search teams worked throughout the day despite the fog and high waves. Rescue helicopters were also deployed. Vincent's family was shocked and distraught by his disappearance. Among them, Angelica appeared the calmest. She continued to post various photos and videos on social media, which seemed out of place given the circumstances. When asked, she said she still hoped Vincent would be rescued and remained positive. However, his relatives felt she was indifferent to the severity of the situation. Meanwhile, searchers knew that almost no one, not even a skilled athlete, could survive in such harsh conditions. 10 days after Vincent went missing, Angelica was called in for further questioning. She casually mentioned that she might have removed the drain plug from Vincent's kayak when they returned. This led the police to suspect that his disappearance might not have been accidental, and that she might have been involved in his drowning. She also mentioned that Vincent's oar was broken, which she had tried to fix. According to her statement, she had removed the fixing ring from the oar blade. The police believed that the unscrewed drain plug and the broken oar suggested that Angelica might have wanted to kill him. However, they could not understand her motive, as killing someone before marrying him seemed absurd, especially since she did not yet have citizenship or inheritance rights to his property. To gather more information about Angelica, the police decided to interview her acquaintances, which led them to her ex-boyfriend. He was shocked to hear that Angelica might be a murderer. However, the investigation had only just begun. He admitted that Angelica had a darker side. He recalled several times they had drunk together, during which Angelica often caused conflict. He described her as manipulative, noting that she did not want him to go out without her. During questioning, Angelica admitted that there were indeed problems in her relationship. She believed that these problems were related to Vincent's need for intimacy. She expressed that they should break up. The police soon identified a possible motive for the murder. Angelica inherited about $500,000 from his life insurance policy, of which she was named the primary beneficiary. This money could have solved her financial difficulties and helped her start over, especially since she was unemployed. Despite the overwhelming evidence against her, Angelica maintained her innocence. She was arrested and released on bail before her trial, facing a charge of second-degree murder. Her attorney argued that the confession obtained during an 11-hour interrogation should not be considered valid. The defense attorney emphasized the autopsy and its results to determine if there were signs of violence, which would be necessary to establish the murder charge. He claimed that the incident was an unfortunate accident. The attorney believed that the kayak likely capsized due to the waves, or that the drain plug came loose when the kayak was hit by the waves. There was also discussion of the strong winds, cold water, and lack of a life jacket. However, Angelica was wearing a life jacket and took precautions for her safety, unlike Vincent. Vincent, on the other hand, had no regard for his own safety and was drunk, which may have influenced his actions. To counter the prosecutor's claims, the attorney conducted an investigation on the Hudson River. He had a man of similar build to Vincent use a similarly styled kayak to demonstrate how low the water level was in the small boat. The attorney argued that large waves could have quickly flooded the kayak, even without the drain plug being removed. Drunken Vincent may have made several mistakes despite his skill and training, suggesting that the incident should be considered an accident. There is some debate about whether the kayak could have absorbed enough water to sink quickly several miles from shore. The drain plug was particularly controversial. It was a small hole, about the size of a pinky finger, located on the top of Vincent's model kayak. This raises the question of whether a significant amount of water could have entered through the hole if it had been left open. To investigate this theory, additional tests were conducted using the same kayak model and a mannequin of the same weight and size as Vincent. Tests were performed to determine how much water could have entered through the open drain plug while the rest of the kayak was sealed. The results showed that the hole was too small. Each wave that struck the kayak only allowed a few drops of water to enter. Therefore, they were able to paddle several kilometers to safety. A small hole would certainly not have been enough to sink the entire kayak. The lawyer argued that Vincent's kayak could have capsized due to the strong waves, especially considering his level of intoxication. This explanation seemed more plausible than the theory that it had flooded because of the drain plug. During questioning, Angelica admitted that she had removed the drain plug from Vincent's kayak. This raised suspicions that she had done so to cause trouble for her fiancé, who was considering calling off the wedding. The potential life insurance payout could have seemed like a path to a better future for her. The defense believed that Angelica's comments led the police to charge her with murder. The police had dismissed the possibility of an accident, despite clear evidence of bad weather. To address this issue, the attorneys called in an expert with years of experience working with criminals. This expert scrutinized every detail of Angelica's 11-hour interrogation. The expert believes that the police repeatedly violated the rules of interrogation. They clearly pressured Angelica, causing her to give false statements. During her conversation with the police, Angelica mentioned that she adjusted and tried to tighten the drain plug. However, throughout the recording, there is no clear confession to the murder. The frightened and exhausted girl fell into a trap by misunderstanding some of the police's vague questions. The interrogation mainly involved the police trying to get Angelica to repeat what she had said on the island where Vincent drowned. The expert noted that she was clearly frightened, slightly intoxicated, and traumatized by witnessing her lover drown. In such a state, it would be unreasonable to interpret her statements as evidence of guilt. However, when she arrived at the station, the police put considerable pressure on her, focusing particularly on the words she had said near the Hudson River. An expert interrogator observed clear signs of manipulation during the interrogation. Through many leading questions, the police discovered that the underlying motive was anger over Vincent's unorthodox views on intimacy. Police explained Angelica's actions by mentioning her touching the boat's drain plug, which they believe led to Vincent's drowning. The expert suspected that Angelica's confession was coerced, although not through physical violence. The police employed many classic interrogation techniques to extract a confession. When Angelica finally mentioned that she had thought about getting out of the relationship, The police treated this as a confession to murder. However, contrary to the prosecutor's belief, she never used the word murder during the conversation at the station. After the police heard what they wanted, they ignored all of Angelica's other statements. In fact, she claimed that this was not the first time she had encountered problems with the kayak. The issues had started a few months before the Vincent's crash. In the winter, the button had been missing for a while, and during that time, they visited the reservoirs and floated without any problems. Unfortunately, the police noticed inconsistencies in Angelica's testimony. She initially said that there was a button, but then insisted that there was none. This inconsistency caused the police to intensify their questioning. The key moment in the interrogation that the expert examined was when Angelica began to break down. She cried and expressed a need to care for her cat at home. After a grueling 11 hours at the police station, she looked exhausted. The police seemed to see her emotional state as an opportunity to extract a confession to the murder. They increased the pressure and asked her leading questions. Ultimately, however, Angelica did not confess to the crime. The expert concluded that the erroneous answers given during questioning were misleading. Angelica's anxiety and intense desire to escape the unpleasant situation caused her to give some inaccurate answers. She did not know that these answers would be used to build a case against her for a murder she did not commit. On the morning of Saturday, May 23, 2015, Vincent's body was discovered a month after his disappearance in the Hudson River. A boatman found the body a few miles downstream from Bannerman Island, where the couple had been visiting that fateful day. An autopsy was performed, and the medical examiner determined that Vincent had drowned. He likely died from the cold water and strong currents, which made it difficult for him to stay afloat. There were no signs of violence, physical assault, or strangulation on his body. However, there was some alcohol in his blood, although not in excessive amounts. They also started looking for the kayak in that direction. After a while, they found it drifting a few hundred meters away. It turned out that Vincent's kayak had lost its drain plug. They found the paddle, and it was still usable. The defense argued that the lack of a drain plug and problems with the paddle could not have caused the drowning. They claimed that only when combined with other factors, such as water temperature, wind conditions, the absence of a life jacket, and the influence of alcohol, could Vincent's situation have led to the tragedy. The prosecutor's office then focused on inconsistencies in Angelica's testimony, believing that they pointed to her involvement in the murder. The attorney argued that the incident was an accident due to Vincent's own negligence. He had been intoxicated in rough waters and was not wearing a life jacket. Vincent was fully aware that the water was cold, and that if he fell in, his chances of survival would be virtually non-existent. Angelica maintained her innocence, but the situation soon changed. The prosecutor's office began to realize that proving she had attempted murder by pulling the drain plug from his kayak would be too difficult. This weak evidence made it challenging for them to convince a jury of her guilt. Meanwhile, Angelica's defense attorney worked extensively with experts, presenting strong factual arguments to support her case. Angelica was offered a plea deal to plead guilty to involuntary manslaughter. Under state law, second-degree murder is punishable by life in prison, while charges involving negligent conduct or accidents are punishable by 1 to 4 years in prison. Given the time she had already spent in custody, her attorney advised her to accept the deal. Angelica agreed, and her confession helped her avoid a jury trial. She was eventually sentenced to 4 years in prison, most of which she served while awaiting trial. On December 21, 2017, Angelica was paroled after serving 32 months. Vincent's family and friends were unhappy with the decision, still believing she had killed her fiancé. Despite their accusations, Angelica maintained her innocence, claiming that only she and God knew the truth. After her release, she sought peace, but faced the threat of deportation and challenges in finding employment. Angelica attempted to claim benefits from Vincent's insurance policy, but her earlier guilty plea made this impossible. She was then forced to return to her home country. There, she enrolled in college, found a job, and resumed her life, fully recovering from the trauma of her past. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Natalia Martinez. Natalia Martinez was born in the late 1980s in Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, and she was the youngest daughter in her family. While not much is known about her personality, she had a close relationship with her relatives, especially her older sister, Claudia. Her father was a senior salesman for a large international company that sold household appliances, which allowed the family to live comfortably. Natalia was a cheerful and friendly girl. During her teenage years, she formed a close-knit group of friends who supported one another during difficult times. These friends later described her as sociable and able to connect easily with strangers. After graduating from high school, Natalia began spending more time with her friends. They enjoyed going to various parties and eventually expanded their adventures by visiting the beaches of Uruguay for fun. To celebrate her 19th birthday on January 1st, 2007, Natalia and her friends planned a trip to La Paloma, a small resort town, where they stayed for 2 weeks. On January 16th, they traveled to a nearby resort in the city of Reales, where Natalia was delighted to meet her parents and sister, who were there for a 4-day vacation. The Natalia family had a wonderful time enjoying beach activities and were well known in the town, as they frequently visited. They often returned to the same places, making it feel like a second home. On January 18th, Natalia and her sister Claudia decided to drive to Punta del Este, another tourist town less than an hour away from Reales. They planned to stop at a popular local spa located about halfway between the two towns in the Serra San Antonio area. After their beauty treatment, the girls planned to go to a disco with 3 of Natalia's friends. However, as the evening approached, Claudia felt very tired and decided to go home to their parents. Despite this, 19-year-old Natalia Martinez was determined to stick to her plans. She wanted to enjoy herself, so she went with her friends to a popular party at the local nightclub, La Arena Canada, where they stayed until around 5 a.m. As morning approached, the girls decided to leave the party and head home. At that time, Natalia was talking with a man named Leonardo Roccovan, an old acquaintance who owned a bookstore. They stopped near the exit and continued their conversation. However, Natalia became so engrossed in her discussion with Leonardo that her friends decided to go outside and get into the car they had arrived in, planning to head home together. The girls got tired and got into the car. One of them decided to check on Natalia, but when they returned to the nightclub, they found that Natalia and Leonardo were gone. The friends realized that Natalia could not have left alone or with anyone else without letting them know. Since they did not see her leave, they began to worry. They went up to the second floor, out of the bar, and saw Leonardo's BMW in the parking lot. The owner was inside the car, and because the windows were tinted, Rosalia and Silva could not see if anyone was in the passenger seat. However, they did notice some movement inside the car. The girls called out to Leonardo to ask about Natalia. He said he was in the car with a friend and mentioned that he had spoken to Natalia briefly before they parted ways. He claimed he had no idea what happened to her afterward or why she didn't return to her friends. The girls assumed Natalia had gone home, so they got into the car and drove to her friends' relatives, who were at the police station, just a 10-minute drive from the club. Rosalia and Silva stopped near the house and honked to get Claudia's attention, trying not to wake the entire family. However, no one responded, so they returned to the club where they last saw Natalia. The girls continued to search for their friend for about 2 hours, but their efforts were unsuccessful. No one knew where she had gone. Around 8 a.m., Silva returned home, exhausted and very worried about her missing friend. Worried about her friend's safety, she decided to tell her parents everything that had happened. She feared something bad might have happened to her friend. Her parents tried to reassure her, telling her to rest and that her friend was probably already home. So, she went to bed. Yet, when she woke up at 11 a.m. that same day, her concerns grew stronger. The entire Natalia family started searching for she. They quickly got involved, and her friends went to the club together to find out what happened. Unfortunately, they were still unsuccessful. The club was closed, and no one had any helpful information. They searched the surrounding area for clues but found nothing. Around 5 p.m., Natalia's family and friends arrived at the police station. Maldonado police investigators received several photos, including one of all the girls relaxing at a club that evening. This helped them understand what the missing girl was wearing so they could come up with a description for the search. The police took their statements seriously and began investigating. Initially, the family said that Natalia had been at a party where she may have had too much to drink and left with someone. However, Rosalia and Silva insisted that Natalia had not consumed any alcohol that night, as she often denied. They also dismissed the police's suspicions that they had used illegal drugs. Police began a search operation. They first went to the location where Natalia was last seen. The club was open, but there were no surveillance cameras at the time. Police spoke to club employees and learned that a group of 3 young men sitting at a nearby table had been trying to approach the women throughout the evening. Natalia's friends confirmed that the men had been harassing them. Despite this information, police ignored the group of young men and instead focused on the acquaintance with whom Natalia had been talking before she disappeared. It was no surprise that Leonardo immediately became the prime suspect, since he was the last person to see Natalia. However, all of Leonardo's acquaintances described him as a kind and calm person who had never shown any signs of cruelty before and was incapable of harming anyone. He was a young businessman. That night, his girlfriend waited for him in the car while he was talking to Natalia. After that, he said goodbye to Natalia and returned to the car with his girlfriend. From the car, he saw Natalia go down the stairs and go out onto the porch. From that moment on, Leonardo was distracted by his conversation with his girlfriend and did not see Natalia again. However, he was not worried about her, since he did not notice anything suspicious around. No one was screaming or making noise. Despite the police's suspicions, Leonardo insisted he had nothing to do with Natalia's disappearance. However, the police did not trust him. They needed to conduct a thorough examination of the BMW he drove away in after the party. Several witnesses reported seeing a similar car in various locations around the city, including near a forest on the outskirts. One man claimed he spotted a couple having sex in a car that matched the description on the night she went missing, near a lake by the woods. Police obtained a search warrant for Leonardo's car. During the initial inspection, they found a long, dark hair on the floor of the BMW and sent it for analysis. However, it did not match Natalia. It belonged to someone else. The interior of the car showed no signs of suspicious activity, no blood, or evidence of a struggle. Police speculated that Leonardo had cleaned the car shortly after Natalia Martinez disappeared, which would explain the clean condition of the car. Police used this detail as part of the evidence against Leonardo. However, they still lacked the evidence to arrest him. On January 22nd, a passerby driving on the outskirts of P. Polis discovered several items on the roadside. Among them were a woman's handbag containing a wallet and a pair of women's shoes. The most crucial piece of evidence was linked to Natalia Martinez, a case that was currently receiving significant media attention. Recognizing the situation, the witness promptly contacted the police. Unfortunately, the media coverage also led to the spread of various rumors, which Natalia's family had to repeatedly deny. One such rumor suggested that Natalia was involved with drug dealers, implying that she had become a victim of criminal activities. However, Natalia's father publicly refuted these claims in an official television statement. Despite the situation, rumors continued to spread. Some claimed to have witnessed her being attacked or even murdered. Instead of receiving assistance from the media, police found themselves overwhelmed by numerous false testimonies each day that needed to be verified, complicating the investigation. Meanwhile, the media eagerly reported even the most outrageous theories. The story was considered compelling and attracted many readers, causing journalists to add fuel to the fire of chaos surrounding the case. The rumors about the missing girl were leveraged to boost newspaper sales. Natalia's family endured immense pain following her disappearance. A large-scale search operation was organized, involving many police officers, friends, family members, and hundreds of volunteers. It was quickly determined that there was no evidence of the girl near the nightclub, prompting the search to extend into more distant areas of Uruguay. Ultimately, the entire coast was thoroughly searched. Most of the search operations took place on land, using service dogs, and later involving military and civilian aircraft. The City Fire Brigade also participated in the search and requested that the sewer systems be inspected. However, no traces of Natalia were found there either. By this point, law enforcement had largely concluded that Natalia was deceased, as the likelihood of finding her alive was very low. The critical window for finding missing persons is usually 48 hours. A significant finding occurred when a bone was discovered on the Grande Plateau, but tests revealed it was not human. Although the search had stalled and no new leads had emerged, Natalia's relatives continued their efforts. They remained hopeful that she was alive and being held against her will. In 2000, a female body was discovered in the forest near Lake Yulo. The body was in poor condition and was sent for examination to determine the identity of the deceased. This location was several kilometers from the club where Natalia was last seen, and the clothing found on the body led police to suspect it might belong to the missing Natalia Martinez. After the discovery of the body, police remembered a couple who had been seen having sex in a car near the forest, which drew attention to that area. The forensic expert who performed the autopsy struggled to gather important information because the body was in an advanced state of decomposition. To ensure a thorough examination, 5 forensic experts were called in. They determined that the body belonged to Natalia Martinez. Their overall assessments suggested that she likely did not die of natural causes, as there were faint signs of strangulation on her neck. Although they ruled out poisoning from substances or alcohol, they could not find evidence of physical or sexual violence due to the body's condition. It was noteworthy that the victim was found tied with nylon thread, but it remained unclear whether this occurred before or after her death. Several months later, while the investigation continued, an unexpected development arose. The man who had found her belongings on the roadside was discovered dead at the bottom of a cliff near his home. His name was initially kept confidential. Initially, it appeared that the man had voluntarily chosen to end his life. However, all his relatives insisted that he would never do such a thing. He was a deeply religious man, cherished his life, and loved his family. An autopsy revealed that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, sustained long before the fall from the cliff, suggesting he had been thrown off. This led police to believe the two cases were linked. But more evidence was needed. The next tragic event involved Natalia's father, Ever Martinez. He had fallen into a deep depression after his daughter's death and the damaging rumors that were circulating about their family. He ended his life at home by shooting himself in the head. His body was discovered by his daughter Claudia and his wife. The police closed the case after confirming that he had acted alone, a conclusion that the family accepted. For a long time, police struggled to make progress in the investigation into Natalia's murder. However, new information emerged from text messages exchanged with a friend just days before Natalia's death. In these conversations, Natalia mentioned a man she had recently met online. It was later discovered that he was one of the men who had been at the nightclub on the day Natalia went missing. These three young men were sitting at a nearby table, and several witnesses had pointed them out from the beginning of the investigation, but this information was overlooked. Police identified all three suspects, who were slightly older than Natalia. After interviewing them, the police became even more suspicious of their involvement, as the men contradicted each other in their statements about where they were and what they did during the night and morning of that tragic day. After this, the police interviewed a witness whose identity was kept confidential for her safety. She was the girlfriend of one of the men who had been arrested. Her testimony revealed that a young man in the group, Rodrigo Verghese, was involved in Natalia's murder. At the time, he was 25 years old, and police later stated that he had previously provided false statements. During the interrogation, police recorded phone conversations that implicated the Rodrigo main suspect. They collected DNA samples from him, but these were not helpful for the investigation due to the advanced decomposition of the remains. After that, the police reached out to the friends and relatives of the Rodrigo. A young man was called to testify on June 8, 2010, along with his friends who had been at a nightclub on the night of Natalia's murder. They all claimed they had no involvement in the incident. They stated that after spending the night at the club, they hired a sex worker to join them in their continued festivities. However, they denied any connection to Natalia. Rodrigo, the prime suspect, denied spending time with the murdered woman and claimed he did not know her. However, messages from the girl revealed that they had spoken online and planned to meet at a party, suggesting that Rodrigo had lied. Initial questioning did not turn up any clues, but a day later, police spoke to the young people again in the hope of getting a confession. This time, Rodrigo confessed. He explained that he had met Natalia online, and after chatting for a while, they decided to meet at a club. Unfortunately, their conversation did not go well, and as dawn approached, he suggested they go to another nearby nightclub. Rodrigo misled her. He wanted to be alone with her. During this time, he began to harass her, according to his confession. When she rejected his advances, he seemed to accept it. However, Natalia then suffered an asthma attack, which led to convulsions and ultimately her death, as she did not have her inhaler or any medication with her. Rodrigo was confused and unable to help her. He stated that he panicked during her attack and didn't know what to do, especially when she stopped showing signs of life in his car. After the party, he planned to return to his family's farm, a short distance from the city. However, after Natalia's death, he decided to dispose of her body to avoid any further repercussions. He headed for the woods, thinking it would be a good place to hide her. There, he tied Natalia up, dragged her deeper into the woods, and covered her body with branches. But this was only part of the story. A witness walking along the beach claimed to have seen a couple having sex, and Natalia's body showed signs of strangulation. It seems that Rodrigo neglected to mention that he had strangled and raped her at the same time. Police were later able to confirm that Rodrigo's other friends were not involved in the incident, so they were released shortly after Rodrigo confessed. Rodrigo was formally charged with murder and taken into custody. After the confession, it appeared that the prosecutor's office would easily prove the Rodrigo's guilt. However, in mid-2010, as preliminary hearings began, Rodrigo Verghese recanted his confession. He claimed he admitted to the murder under police pressure and insisted he did not commit the crime. This assertion seemed unlikely because his confession included numerous details only the actual killer would know, including the precise location where the girl's body was found. Still, Rodrigo maintained his innocence. Despite the evidence against him, his defense team supported his statement and sought to demonstrate that Rodrigo was not at the club that night. They presented mobile phone data and a statement from his employer confirming that he had been working his usual evening shift that day. The next day, he attended a friend's wedding, and no one noticed anything unusual about his behavior. On September 2, 2010, Leonardo Rakovin, the bookstore owner who was initially the main suspect in the investigation, was called as a key witness for the prosecution. Leonardo testified that during a conversation, he had an argument with a young man. Leonardo identified the young man as Rodrigo. This indicated that Rodrigo was definitely at the nightclub and not at work. Natalia's friends also confirmed that he was at the nightclub that night. Forensic experts, working with the prosecution, provided insights based on the autopsy results. They noted that, due to the typical symptoms of asthma, the girl could not have died from an asthma attack so quickly. While she did experience an asthma attack, it could not have occurred instantaneously. It took several hours. Additionally, there were signs of strangulation on the victim's neck, which was likely the cause of death. Unfortunately, the experts could not provide further details about the victim's injuries. From late August to mid-September 2010, the prosecution successfully constructed a narrative of the crime, leading to Rodrigo Verghese being found guilty of Natalia Martinez's murder. He received a 9-year prison sentence. However, in February 2011, Rodrigo's lawyer submitted an appeal, claiming that the court's ruling was incorrect and that the prosecution was biased. The lawyer argued that they failed to present a witness to the kidnapping or murder, nor did they provide any compelling direct evidence. Natalia's family expressed disappointment, saying that the criminal received a lighter sentence than the family had expected. Disappointed by this leniency, Natalia's relatives filed a civil lawsuit against Rodrigo Verghese for causing harm to Natalia's family, holding him responsible for her father's death. Initially, they mentioned that Rodrigo should pay $15 in damages. However, after further discussion, both parties agreed to increase the amount of damages to $7,000. The court rejected the request for a longer sentence. On October 27, 2014, the lawyer achieved his goal when Rodrigo, 29, was pardoned after serving only 4 years and 2 months in prison. His release was largely due to his good behavior while in custody. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Menqi Ji. In 2012, Menqi Ji, a Chinese citizen, enrolled at the University of Missouri, Columbia, USA, where she earned a master's degree in mechanical and aerospace engineering. One of her professors was impressed by her expertise and offered her a job at biomaterials company. While working there, Menqi met her future husband, Joe Elledge, in September 2015, as he was pursuing his engineering studies. They both worked at the same company, where Menqi was Joe's boss. Their feelings for each other grew quickly, and just a year and 7 months after their first meeting, Joe proposed to Menqi on September 22, 2017, on a trail at Rockbridge Memorial State Park, called the Devil's Refrigerator. They got married only 2 weeks later. Menqi's parents think they rushed into marriage due to the impending expiration of Menqi's visa. They felt that American citizens couldn't fully grasp the difficulty that immigrants face. Although Menqi is financially independent, but she still has difficulty obtaining citizenship. After nearly 5 months, Menqi received a promotion at work. Soon after, she discovered she was pregnant. Menqi and Joe decided that she should decline the promotion and leave her job to focus entirely on motherhood, even though she was the primary breadwinner for their family at that time. Their income decreased significantly, but it was sufficient for their essential needs. In October 2018, Joe and Menqi's family gave birth to their first daughter. However, after her birth, Menqi and Joe began to face difficulties. Although their marriage appeared normal to outsiders, only Menqi's parents were aware of the reality. After quitting her job, Menqi felt completely isolated. She doesn't communicate with anyone. Her small child became her only companion, along with daily phone calls from her mother. Traditionally, Menqi's parents had to travel from China to the United States before she gave birth to help care for and support her. They lived in a separate house nearby and visited Menqi daily, but their appearance increased tension between Menqi and her husband, Joe. On October 9, 2019, a year after Menqi's daughter was born, Menqi's parents were alarmed when they didn't receive a call from her. Unable to reach her, they sent a family friend who lived close by to check on Menqi. When the friend arrived, Joe answered the door and revealed that Menqi was missing. He shared a troubling account. On the evening of October 8, he had tried to give Menqi a massage and flirt with her, but she rejected him, saying she needed sleep because she had important plans for the next day. Joe stated that he woke up the next morning to find Menqi gone. She had left behind her car keys, mobile phone, wallet, and, most importantly, did not take their daughter with her. Despite her absence, Joe did not immediately report her missing, believing she was simply out for a walk and would return. A family friend attempted to call Menqi but was unsuccessful. Eventually, under pressure, Joe reported her disappearance to the police, but rather than calling 911, he reached out to the non-emergency number 311. Menqi's parents were unaware of this and were convinced the police were actively searching for their daughter. On October 15, 2019, a week after Menqi went missing, her husband, Joe Elledge, reported her disappearance to the Columbia, Missouri Police Department. He recounted to detectives the same information he had shared with a family friend. Joe described Menqi as appearing stressed the night before she went missing. He mentioned that she went to bed after telling him she had important matters to attend to the next morning. When he asked her 3 times who she was meeting, she did not provide clear answers. He suspected she might be having an affair and secretly meeting another man. Later that day, Joe informed investigators that he had discovered notes on Menqi's computer discussing an affair. Joe said Menqi texted a man from China. The message ended with her expressing sadness that her husband was not interested in her. Joe speculated that Menqi might have left him for this man, potentially abandoning their daughter for a new life. He expressed his love for their daughter and his desire for Menqi to return home safely. From the outset, investigators were skeptical of Joe's account and considered him a suspect. Joe's family hired a lawyer, who revealed that Menqi and the man China with had intimate and emotional conversations via text messages. The main question is whether Menqi went to see the man who lives in China, and where she is now. The police found out that Joe, upon realizing his wife was missing, did not call 911, but instead contacted 311. This made them even more suspicious of him. He willingly returned to the Columbia Police Department for further questioning. Investigators grew increasingly suspicious of his account, particularly when Joe mentioned taking long drives to find new walking spots instead of searching for his missing wife. Additionally, it was noted that Joe closed the door before leaving their apartment. It seemed like Joe didn't care how Menqi got home, especially since her phone keys were left behind. Menqi didn't drive the car. Detectives had suspicions, but they found no evidence to prove Joe was involved in his wife's disappearance, no blood, weapons, witnesses, or body. Furthermore, there was no indication that Menqi ran away to meet another man in China. They also confirmed that Menqi had not booked any flights. From the start, it was clear that Menqi would never have abandoned her beloved daughter. Menqi's parents refused to accept this hypothesis and insisted that she was a loving mother. When detectives spoke with Joe, they asked for his phone number, which he willingly provided. Inside his phone, investigators discovered something alarming: over 10 hours of secretly recorded conversations with his wife, in which Joe expressed his dissatisfaction with their marriage and his desire for a divorce. He also discussed plans to send his wife back to China. However, this discovery was minor compared to the nearly 4.5 hours of recordings found on Menqi's phone. In these conversations, the true nature of Joe emerged. He threatened his wife, referred to himself as God, and demanded that her parents stay away from their home. It was chilling. The Joe family's issues started a few weeks before Min-chi gave birth. Her parents traveled from China to support their daughter, following a tradition where grandparents help with the baby for 100 days. This custom bothered Joe immensely, as he had a strong dislike for Min-chi's parents. What really angered Joe was that Min-chi tried to fight him back, and she said that she needed her parents. She loved them very much and needed their help taking care of the newborn. When Min-chi had just given birth, the relationship between her and her husband became very tense, and they argued a lot. Min-chi's mother mentioned that Joe disliked it when Min-chi spoke Chinese around him because he barely understood the language. Joe interpreted everything they said as hurtful and negative towards him. Eventually, when Min-chi's father could no longer tolerate the situation and returned to China, Joe felt relieved and seeing it as his personal victory. Now, he only had to manage his mother-in-law and reassert his authority in the home. Min-chi's mother made Chinese dumplings for Joe's birthday, but he didn't like the way she used the cutting board. This sparked a heated argument between Joe and her. Joe angrily demanded that she leave his house for good. Min-chi's mother, who believed in maintaining harmony because of her Confucian values, chose not to confront Joe and did not defend herself against his harsh words. Min-chi pleaded with Joe to allow her mother to stay because she needed her mother's support, but Joe only replied with insults and foul language. Joe told Min-chi was incompetent solely because she was a woman. Joe attempted to manipulate and control her. He even threatened Min-chi's mother, claiming he would harm her. This left Min-chi's mother in shock. She didn't understand why Joe was so angry with both her and Min-chi. Feeling helpless, Min-chi sought help from Joe's mother, who quickly lost her temper and drove 2 hours to address the family conflict. However, even with his mother present, Joe couldn't hide his disdain for his mother-in-law. He demanded that she kneel and bow to him. Although Joe eventually apologized to her, he still insisted that she leave before the 100-day mark. Consequently, Min-chi's mother returned to China. In October 2019, Min-chi disappeared. Detectives believed that serious family conflicts made her feel trapped, especially regarding her immigration status. Just 5 months prior, she had to attend another interview to apply for citizenship. 2 weeks after Min-chi's disappearance, the Columbia Police Department opened a criminal investigation into the case. On the same day, 16 days after she went missing, police arrested Joe Elledge on suspicion of child abuse. Joe confessed to physically abusing his 1-year-old daughter, claiming it was a form of discipline. Before Min-chi went missing, she told her mother that she had seen bruises on her daughter and suspected Joe was the cause. Her mother advised her to report Joe to the police, but Min-chi never had the opportunity to do so. Joe's lawyer claimed this was merely an attempt to get Joe imprisoned. He argued that Joe made a mistake, emphasizing that he is a young single father who might have erred. Joe was released on bail, while his mother assisted him and cared for her granddaughter. Meanwhile, detectives continued to gather evidence against Joe, convinced that he was involved in Min-chi's disappearance. On October 25, 2019, police obtained a search warrant and entered the apartment. Joe had been missing for just over 2 weeks. During the search, they collected Min-chi's backpack and notes that Joe had written to help himself prepare for questions from reporters and investigators. Detectives thoroughly searched the apartment for any evidence and, following a hunch, they also took a pair of dirty boots for examination, but they found nothing significant. On the same day, Joe Elledge was arrested on suspicion of child abuse after fresh bruises were discovered on the girl's body. Meanwhile, the search for Min-chi has become a search for her remains, because no one believes she is still alive. Detectives carefully tracked all movements of Joe's car and phone. However, every lead they followed led to dead ends in this complex case. As a result, the detective made the decision to charge Joe Elledge with first-degree murder, even without a body. These charges were filed while Joe was still in jail on child abuse allegations. Meanwhile, detectives continued their efforts to locate Minchie. Phone records indicated that Joe was away for 30 minutes on the day he reported her missing, a fact he did not share with investigators. When the detectives searched that location, they found nothing. After months of searching, the police were still unable to find Minchie. Her mother traveled to the United States to help with the search, convinced that her daughter's body was nearby. Over the following months, the police conducted regular searches in the area, and Minchie's mother held a memorial by the river. A year later, while Joe was still awaiting his trial, a tourist was walking in the park where Joe had proposed to Minchie. He noticed something shiny in the mud and discovered it was a wallet. Upon closer inspection, he saw a pair of shoes and then what looked like a human skull. He immediately contacted the police. Upon investigation, it was confirmed that the remains were those of Minchie. Her parents learned that their daughter had died, but the circumstances surrounding her death were still unclear. Much time had passed, and even forensic experts could not determine the cause of death. They found unnatural damage to her bones, including 4 broken ribs, indicating she had suffered a strong blow to the back. Detectives began to piece together a theory about what happened to Minchie, focusing on the evidence collected after her disappearance. They noted that Joe's cell phone records indicated he was near the location where Minchie was found on the day he reported her missing. On the day Minchie disappeared, it had been raining. Key evidence included Joe's dirty boots. The dirt and gravel on the soles, along with foliage, were sent to the Missouri Botanical Garden for analysis. The lab carefully removed juniper tree needles from the boots for DNA testing. A lab worker then climbed nearby juniper trees, numbered each, and collected fresh needles from the highest branches. These samples were preserved and compared with the needles found on Joe's shoes, revealing a DNA match. On November 1, 2021, Joe Elledge's trial for the murder of his wife, Minchie, began. With compelling evidence that Joe was present at the scene where Minchie's body was discovered on the day she went missing, including DNA from the trees and geolocation data. However, his lawyer presented a new narrative. The lawyer claimed that Joe did kill his wife, but insisted it was a tragic accident. Due to evidence from the juniper tree and its DNA, Joe could no longer assert that Minchie had run away. He had to confess that he buried her in a shallow grave. Joe stated that he was aware of his wife's communication with a man from China, and they had an argument that night. Feeling upset and hurt, he wanted to take their daughter for a walk. Minchie rushed towards him, intending to take the child, but Joe pushed her away. She fell against the table, injured her ribs, and lost consciousness. When she regained consciousness, she went to bed. In the morning, when the child started crying, Minchie did not wake up. Joe then realized she had passed away in her sleep. He claimed that his wife had attacked him first and that he was only defending himself, asserting it was self-defense. However, this explanation seemed highly questionable. Joe was twice the size of his wife, making it unlikely that she could have attacked him, and after sustaining such a severe injury, she would not have been able to get up and walk to the bed. The prosecutor argued that the evidence, particularly the 4 broken ribs, suggested Joe's account was fabricated. This injury indicated she had suffered a brutal beating. The prosecutor alleged that it was premeditated murder driven by months of escalating anger. Joe harbored hatred for his wife. In court, the prosecutor presented secret audio recordings between the couple to reveal the true dynamics of their relationship. These recordings helped clarify the motive behind the crime. No evidence of Minchie communicating with other men was ever found. On November 11, 2021, after nearly 7 hours of discussion, the jury reached a verdict. They found Joe Elledge guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison. Munchie and Joe's daughter currently lives with Joe's mother, but Munchie's parents are pursuing joint custody of their 4-year-old granddaughter. Joe's lawyer argues that while the child will always have a relationship with her Chinese grandparents, she should stay in the care of Joe's mother for her safety. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Taylor Wright. Taylor Wright was born on April 23, 1988. Friends and family described her as energetic and full of life. She was kind and empathetic, spending most of her life in North Carolina as she pursued her American dream. Taylor married Jeff Wright and later had a son named Drake. She earned a college degree and worked as an officer at the local police station, where she solved numerous crimes and was respected. To the outside world, Taylor's life seemed perfect. She had a loving husband, a son, and a respected job. However, the reality was that not everything in her life was as idyllic as it appeared. Taylor's close friends knew that she smoked marijuana occasionally, but she kept it a secret. During her time in the police force, she used it to manage stress and her heavy workload. She claimed that she didn't smoke regularly, only occasionally to relax after a long day. However, Jeff found out about her secret and left with her son after their divorce. This made Taylor realize that she needed to change her life. In 2016, Taylor decided to start over and moved to Pensacola, Florida, a small resort town with a population of about 52,000. She likes the warm, comfortable atmosphere here. After quitting her job, she began working as a private investigator. Armed with the knowledge and experience from her previous job, she was eager to apply her skills to help her clients. Taylor divorced her husband, but faced two major challenges: child custody and financial issues. Court proceedings to divide assets and child custody were ongoing. It was a complicated divorce, and despite her efforts to reach an agreement, they were unable to reach an agreement, which dragged on. In September 2017, frustrated by financial disputes, Taylor withdrew money from her bank account without telling Jeff. The money, which was her personal savings, was something she did not want to share with Jeff. After withdrawing the money, she gave it to a friend to keep. One of Taylor's friends, Ashley MacArthur, is the main character in this story. Taylor has known Ashley, a forensic scientist, for over a year. Although it was a relatively short period of time, they became very close, to the point where Taylor entrusted Ashley with a large sum of money. Ashley agreed to help and was supposed to deposit the money in a safe deposit box, keeping it a secret from Jeff until Taylor was ready to use it. However, she soon needed money to pay for a lawyer. When Taylor reached out to Ashley, she noticed that Ashley always had excuses for delaying the return of the money or only giving her small amounts. Ashley claimed she was having trouble withdrawing the funds or that there were issues with the bank. During this time, Taylor grew increasingly suspicious that something was wrong and worried that her money might have been spent. Despite Taylor's persistent requests for the full amount to be returned, Ashley continued to provide various excuses. On the evening of September 7, 2017, Taylor and her friend Cassandra Waller went out to dinner. Cassandra had quickly become close friends after Taylor moved to the area. Cassandra was new to the city and Taylor suggested they rent an apartment together. Cassandra, a kind teacher, agreed. Over time, they developed a strong friendship. During dinner, Taylor shared her financial concerns, especially about her friend Ashley, who she believed was intentionally delaying repayment of money. Taylor expressed concern that Ashley might have spent the money or not want to pay it back. This made Taylor very anxious and stressed because she desperately needed the money to hire a good lawyer. That evening, Cassandra comforted Taylor, reassuring her that the matter would eventually be resolved, although she also had doubts about whether the money was still there. Taylor mentioned that she had scheduled a meeting with Ashley the next day, September 8th, to go to the bank together. On the morning of September 8th, as Cassandra was getting ready for work, she said goodbye to Taylor. And on her way out of the house, she saw Ashley's sitting car in the driveway. They were finally ready to take care of their banking issues. The girls said goodbye, and Cassandra drove off to school. Later that day, Ashley called Cassandra to inform her that she and Taylor had decided not to go to the bank, opting instead to go to the farm. This confused Cassandra, as she knew Taylor was in dire need of money. The night before, Taylor had been very stressed and emotional at dinner, eager to get her financial situation sorted out. Ashley explained that she and Taylor had been discussing Taylor's struggles. Ashley suggested that horseback riding might help Taylor improve spirit, therefore them to cancel their bank trip and plan an alternative vacation. This explanation seemed strange to Cassandra, but she wished them luck anyway. However, after the call, Cassandra attempted to contact Taylor but received no response to her calls or messages. Later on, Cassandra received a text from Taylor, who said she couldn't talk at the moment but would call back later. Taylor explained that she was feeling uncertain and depressed due to her divorce and the changes in her life, and that she was going out of town for a few days. Cassandra believed her and decided to give her friend some space. A couple of days later, Cassandra reached out again, asking Taylor to return home as soon as she could. After that, she received no response. As the days passed, Cassandra tried to contact Taylor several times, but Taylor continued to ignore her calls and texts, even though some of the messages were marked as read. Taylor did not return home, and all of her belongings were still intact, which made Cassandra increasingly worried about her friend's safety. Cassandra wanted to see Taylor to make sure she was okay. Their neighbor said that Taylor had used drugs in the past and that she could become withdrawn during difficult times. With the difficulties Taylor was having, Cassandra was worried that she might relapse. Cassandra was feeling anxious. A week had gone by with no news, and waiting seemed pointless. Concerned, her reached out to the police. She told the officers that something was off, as Taylor was behaving unusually and had completely disappeared without explanation. In their shared apartment, there were numerous personal items belonging to Taylor that she would have taken if she had moved. There was no valid reason for her to ignore her friend's calls. Until now, Taylor had never done anything like this. After hearing Cassandra's story, the police took note of the unusual aspects of the case. The police focused on the time frame of her disappearance. Naturally, they interviewed Cassandra first, since she lived in the same house as Taylor and had a close relationship with her. Meanwhile, searches were conducted in the apartment that Cassandra shared with Taylor. In the apartment, the police found Taylor's identification, some cash, and an unloaded revolver. Cassandra explained that they kept weapons in the house for self-defense, but they had never used them. There was nothing else suspicious found, but it was evident that Taylor could not have left for an extended period without her documents, money, and belongings. Cassandra was questioned several times, and she quickly felt that the police suspected her and shifted their focus to proving her innocence. Despite this, she continued to cooperate with the investigation because she wanted to find out the truth. Eventually, she was ruled out as a suspect. Police initially focused on Jeff, given their contentious divorce, which involved the division of assets and custody of their son. Jeff certainly had a strong motive to harm Taylor, but police quickly determined that he was in North Carolina at the time of her disappearance and had not left the city. He had recently remarried and was focused on building a new life, with little regard for his ex-wife. Family members confirmed that despite their divorce, Jeff and Taylor remained on good terms for the sake of their 6-year-old son. Jeff was known to be non-confrontational and had never harmed Taylor. He was not even aware that she had withdrawn money and tried to conceal it. Therefore, there was no reason for him to be angry with her, prompting police to immediately eliminate him as a potential suspect. The police then decide to talk to Ashley, whom Cassandra had mentioned. Her behavior is very unusual. They bring her in for questioning, and the police quickly notice that she is even flirting with the police, which shows that she is not at all concerned about her friend's disappearance. Ashley seems to believe that Taylor is okay. She knows that Taylor has been addicted to marijuana in the past and thinks that Taylor is not really missing but is simply indulging her addiction. Ashley speculates that after receiving some money, Taylor relapsed and went off to use. However, this explanation seems unconvincing because Ashley had previously told Cassandra about the trip to the farm, but she didn't mention that. Only when the police press her does Ashley reveal that they went to the farm because Taylor wanted to relax. During the trip, Taylor confided in her about the stress she was under from the divorce proceedings, which had affected her mental health. After some time, Taylor expressed that she was tired and wanted to go home. She called an Uber and left. Ashley reported that she hadn't seen or heard from Taylor, despite making several attempts to call her. The police were aware of a money issue that Ashley was supposed to resolve but was avoiding, leading them to suspect she was hiding something. Suddenly, Ashley started mentioning a safe deposit box and money, claiming she had no knowledge of the funds being talked about. At this point, the police were confused as there was no clear information regarding the money. Police then decided to look into text messages between her and Taylor. They discovered numerous discussions about money, with Ashley frequently postponing meetings and transferring money. In the text messages, they talked about going to the bank on September 8th to withdraw money. Police requested footage from cameras near Taylor's home. After reviewing the videos, they found the women near Taylor's apartment, which matched Cassandra's earlier account. Ashley was in a car in front of the house when Cassandra left. Taylor then left the house and left with Ashley. Using geolocation, police tracked Taylor and Ashley's movements. Police reviewed surveillance footage from across the city and saw them buying beer and food, which appeared to be normal. However, no further information about their whereabouts was available after that. Inconsistencies began to appear between Ashley's testimony. However, the police decided to release her because they did not have enough evidence against her at that time. After that, Ashley contacted the police station almost daily to check on the progress of the investigation and to see if they had any new information. She wanted to help and often recounted the details of that day, as well as places where Taylor might have gone. During the conversation, she suggested that police should search alleys and talk to people who are selling illegal substances. She believed that Taylor was simply depressed and using drugs uncontrollably, and she repeatedly urged the police to follow up on this lead. She also talked about some suspicious suspects that she had seen with Taylor. Despite Ashley's best efforts to appear concerned, but police are still investigating her connection to Taylor's disappearance. Video evidence shows that Ashley visited the bank after Taylor went missing. During that visit, she withdrew money from Taylor's card. Police are particularly concerned about any potential conflict between Ashley and Taylor. Ashley had a strong motive for her actions, the $34,000 in question. It is suspected that she deliberately delayed her response because she did not want to return the money. Fearing that Taylor might report this to the police, Ashley may have decided to eliminate her friend. With Taylor missing for such a long time, there are concerns that she is no longer alive, but this needs to be confirmed. Ashley had a significant advantage. She worked for the police department and was married to a former deputy chief of the Battery Falcons. This created a difficult situation for the officers, who could not be sure of their safety while investigating her. As a result, they chose to keep the investigation secret. In October, Ashley was called in for questioning again. As the case progressed, documentary and circumstantial evidence accumulated that linked her to Taylor's disappearance. The police noticed a marked change in Ashley's behavior. She went from being outgoing and flirtatious to being withdrawn and clearly anxious. By this time, the police had verified that most of her previous statements were lies. They presented her with clear contradictions in her testimony and began investigating the cashing of hidden checks, which were likely to have forged signatures. At the very least, this could lead to accusations of fraud, but there could be darker motives behind these actions. Ashley initially claimed that she and Taylor had gone to East Milton, where they allegedly spent the day at a farm with animals. They were last seen on surveillance footage at 11:45 a.m., which was the only footage of Taylor alive during her initial interview. She was recorded on surveillance cameras in various locations throughout the day, but she was seen alone. As the police continued to talk to Ashley, she became increasingly nervous. Her answers became more confused, and she struggled to explain the discrepancies in her story. The police obtained a search warrant for the farmhouse but found no evidence in the large area. They then asked about the checks to determine if they were indeed counterfeit. If the checks were genuine, that would mean that Taylor was still alive when Ashley went to the bank, but Ashley could not give a clear answer. She just said that the checks could be real. While examining the geolocation data on Ashley's cell phone, police discovered that she had been staying at Britt Road for an extended period of time. This was another farm owned by her family. In fact, they had been there for several hours before Taylor disappeared. Ashley again confirmed that Taylor was going to buy a truck from a dealership. But this time, she added new details to the story. She said that Taylor was going back to the farm. Ashley had not mentioned these details in her earlier statements, claiming that Taylor had asked her to keep the incident private. Ashley believed that Taylor was still alive and would come back, so she did not want to harm her reputation in front of the police. However, she lied multiple times, leading the police to lose trust in her. The police were very interested in the Ashley family farm in Britt Road. It was a large, isolated area that would have been a fit place to commit the crime and cover it up. During their questioning, the police noted another strange aspect of Ashley's behavior: why she did not contact the police immediately when Taylor promised to return but did not show up. It was clear that Taylor was in trouble and needed help. Although Ashley tried to show concern to the police, she made no effort to find Taylor. Why did she wait until she was called in for questioning to show concern? These questions remain unanswered, but the police believe that Ashley was withholding important information. After her trip to the farm with Taylor, Ashley frequently called the police station to check on the investigation into her friend's disappearance, especially after her initial interview. She was anxious to know if she was being considered a suspect. After her conversation with the police, Ashley realized that she was the prime suspect in the case. She decided to ask for a lawyer, which ended her visit to the police station. On the morning of October 19, 2017, Ashley returned home. That afternoon, police obtained a search warrant for the farm where she and Taylor had been staying. Specially trained dogs were deployed in the search, and within 2 hours, they discovered a suspicious burial site. It was a small pit that appeared to have been recently dug and had been covered with concrete. A human skull was found in a shallow grave, along with other remains that had been hastily buried in the dirt and construction debris. The victim died from a gunshot wound to the head. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, the body could not be identified at the scene. However, based on clothing and jewelry, it is believed that it was Taylor. An autopsy confirmed that the body was Taylor Wright, 30. The identification was completed using dental records and DNA analysis. Ashley was arrested that evening, October 19, 2018, and charged with premeditated murder. Ashley's defense attorney believed in her innocence, but the abundance of circumstantial evidence made it challenging to convince the jury of her non-involvement in the crime. The attorney focused on Ashley's psychological profile, portraying her as sweet, pretty, and a police officer, which seemed inconsistent with being a violent criminal. Friends and family described Ashley as quiet, modest, and incapable of murder, especially when considering her physical attributes. In contrast, Taylor was physically stronger, leading the prosecution to question the defense's arguments. The lawyer developed his strategy based on the fact that the police lacked direct evidence to prove Ashley's guilt. There was no murder weapon, no witnesses, and no DNA linking Ashley to the body. This made it difficult for the prosecutor's office to connect Ashley to the crime. One witness was the victim's ex-husband, Jeff. He stated that he reached out to Ashley a few days after his Taylor went missing, trying to locate her to address some matters related to their marriage and divorce. Jeff contacted Ashley via social media. She claimed that the last time she saw Taylor was when she was exchanging money. She expressed concern about whether Taylor had arrived safely. This was a new detail that Ashley had never mentioned before, leading the police to realize that she was a pathological liar who had deceived everyone around her. Although Jeff was initially investigated and cleared as a suspect due to a solid alibi, he still had a strong motive. The lawyer attempted to redirect the jury's attention to Jeff's possible involvement in his ex-wife's murder. But these efforts were unsuccessful. The testimonies from Ashley's close friends greatly influenced the jury. They revealed that the Ashley was not as she seemed. She frequently visited a strip club. Bartenders and staff stated that just before Taylor went missing, Ashley spoke negatively about Taylor. Later, a gun associated with Taylor's death was discovered in Ashley's house. After new evidence emerged, the Ashley admitted to spiking Taylor's beer with a strong substance. However, when Taylor took a sip, she noticed the drink tasted odd and clearly spoiled. She spat it out and refused to drink any more, which likely led to the failure of Ashley's poisoning plan. Despite this admission, Ashley denied any involvement in the shooting of her friend. The prosecution argued that she had a strong motive. Ashley was holding on to a large sum of Taylor's money and was delaying returning it. Taylor desperately needed the money to pay her lawyer, so if Ashley delayed paying, Taylor would likely report the matter to the police. This situation gave Ashley a motive to get rid of her friend. The police later discovered the reason for the delay in returning the money. Ashley had been secretly having an affair with a man named Brandon, without her husband's knowledge. It was revealed that she had spent all of the money on Brandon, including giving him a motorcycle just weeks before Taylor went missing. This coincided with the time she had received money from Taylor. In court, Brandon admitted that Ashley had frequently given him expensive gifts, but he did not know where she got the money, as she had no other source for such a large sum of money. The police tracked Ashley's movements and discovered that she had gone to Home Depot after Taylor went missing. The police spoke to a sales clerk who confirmed that Ashley had purchased several bags of quick-drying solution. When the substance found in Taylor's grave was tested, it matched the quick-drying compound mentioned by the hardware store employee. This suggests that Ashley attempted to quickly hide Taylor's body on the farm to avoid detection. However, Ashley's attorney argued that she was not physically able to carry the heavy bags, dig the grave, and move Taylor's body. The jury then deliberated for about 4 hours and found Ashley MacArthur guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole after 25 years. She also served an additional 7 years for fraud related to Taylor Wright's finances. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Aisling Murphy. Aisling Murphy, born in 1998, was the youngest of 3 siblings. Her family lived in Blue Ball, Ireland, a peaceful town about an hour's drive from Dublin. Aisling grew up in a loving environment, influenced by her father's passion for music, particularly the bagpipes and violin. Inspired by him, she began studying traditional Irish music. She joined a youth choir in school and later became part of an orchestra, performing folk music at various events across Ireland and Great Britain. She was talented, independent, and sociable, which allowed her to integrate well with her team and feel comfortable on stage. After graduating from school, Aisling quickly sought employment. She was determined to achieve complete independence from her parents, so she began searching for full-time job opportunities right after receiving her diploma. Despite her career ambitions, she continued to nurture her love for music. She often performed for her relatives during special family gatherings on weekends, which further strengthened their connections. Aisling wanted to create her own family someday, but first, she focused on establishing herself. She went to college and became a first-grade teacher at a school where she had previously studied. This moment in her life was very meaningful. The teachers and students appreciated Aisling for her energy, kindness, and creativity. Aisling was truly suited for this role due to her strong moral character. She made a smooth transition from being an excellent student to becoming a wonderful teacher. Aisling was friendly, well-mannered, sweet, and self-assured. During her first week of work, she taught music on weekends, showing her passion for her job and her enjoyment of working with children. At 28, she had been in a relationship with her boyfriend, Ryan, for over 6 years. They met when Aisling was just 15. Initially, their romance didn't last, and they broke up after a few months. However, they eventually reunited, realizing that they were too young when they first started dating as teenagers. Their feelings for each other reignited, and they fell deeply in love, often talking about their future, including marriage and children. They had planned a trip in 2 days, but unfortunately, it seemed their dreams would not come to fruition. Aisling finished her workday and planned to go for a run along the Grand Canal in Tullamore. This was a routine activity for her, as she enjoyed fitness and outdoor recreation. She loved walking or running in beautiful locations, so she often visited the canal when she could. The Grand Canal was a popular spot for runners, featuring a designated path for walking. It was usually busy, which made Aisling comfortable going there alone. After work, Aisling got ready for her run. She first went home to change her clothes and tell her mother about her schedule. Her mother reassured her daughter that she was old enough to take care of herself and that there was no danger in this. Aisling left, and that was the last time her mother saw her alive. About an hour after Aisling left home, 2 runners warming up along the Grand Canal called for help. They were running on one side of the canal and saw a man attacking a girl on the opposite bank. Since they didn't have mobile phones, they ran to the nearest payphone to report the incident. They informed the emergency dispatcher that they had witnessed a threatening man assaulting one of the female runners. The witnesses confirmed that the victim was still alive when the attacker dragged her into the bushes. She screamed and fought back, desperately trying to push him away, but she was clearly outmatched. The dispatchers sent police officers to the specified location. Upon arrival, the police and a witness found the body of a young woman at the canal. The young girl, who showed no signs of life, was found to have been severely beaten, as the caller had reported. She had been pulled off the paved road and into the bushes, where she suffered physical abuse. Her face and neck were covered in cuts, and her hair was matted with dried blood. Paramedics arrived and attempted to resuscitate her for 10 minutes, but they were unable to save her and confirmed her death. While the exact cause of death remained unclear, it was evident she had been beaten badly. The body of the murdered girl was sent for an autopsy, which revealed stab and cut wounds on her neck. A forensic expert identified 11 injuries, primarily on the right side of her neck, including a cut throat that rendered her unable to call for help. Signs of possible strangulation were also found. The victim was identified as Aisling Murphy. On her hands, there were deep cuts, likely sustained during a struggle. Keys were discovered near her body, and it was determined she had used them defensively, gripping them tightly in an effort to fight off her attacker. The weapon used in the attack did not inflict enough damage to prevent the criminal from continuing his assault. Aisling died from severe blood loss caused by multiple stab wounds to her neck, leading to her death within minutes. Near her body, police found sunglasses and a mobile phone in her jacket pocket. An abandoned bicycle was also found nearby, likely belonging to the attacker. The criminal had already fled the scene after harming his innocent victim. The brutality of the attack was shocking, especially since it occurred in broad daylight in a crowded area with witnesses. 2 runners who were in the vicinity witnessed the crime. They observed both the attack and the assailant. They provided vital information to the police. The first witness, Emma, reported that she was walking her dog by the Grand Canal when she noticed a girl jogging. She saw a man on a bright green bicycle closely following the jogger. Initially, Emma thought they might be running together because the cyclist stayed so close to the girl. She described the cyclist as looking like a migrant, not Irish. He had yellowish skin, a short haircut, and was wearing a black tracksuit with red logos. Later, Emma met another witness, Jenna, and together they witnessed the cyclist attack the girl. The attack appeared sudden and unprovoked. Jenna witnessed the attack and provided a detailed account. Her description matched that of another witness, who reported that the victim screamed, threatening the attacker, but then suddenly fell silent. This silence was caused by a wound to Aisling's neck that severely severed her vocal cords. Later, Jenna screamed loudly, threatening to call the police. Despite the threats, the attacker did not let go of the victim. Police found a green bicycle near the trail that belonged to the attacker. Meanwhile, police gathered more evidence and discovered that Aisling had been wearing a fitness tracker while running. The device recorded her body metrics, including speed, distance, and heart rate, helping to clarify the details surrounding her death. The data showed that Aisling started running at 2:51 p.m., and before that, GPS records showed she had parked her bike near the canal. After that, her pulse was around 100 beats per minute, indicating she was in an active phase. She maintained this heart rate until 15:21, during which she ran approximately 3 kilometers. However, after 15:21, her heart rate changed. The Aisling experienced erratic fluctuations, and GPS data showed she was standing still at that time. This was clearly when she was attacked, and by 15:31, her heart had stopped beating. The next step for the police was to review footage from surveillance cameras in the area. Police identified the locations of all recording devices, hoping to find video that would show the suspect, the victim, and the attack itself. Police checked surveillance cameras, focusing on the time frame between 12:25 and 16:05, and were able to identify a man who matched the witness description exactly. It appeared that he was moving randomly along the roads. They determined that this man had appeared long before Aisling's arrival and was using a bicycle identical to the one found at the crime scene. The prime suspect was wearing a black hoodless jacket and sweatpants with stripes down the side, and also had a red logo on his clothes, as Emma described. He had been following a woman in a dark burgundy jacket but was later spotted by her. He had been looking at the victim with interest, but for some unknown reason he quickly fell behind. In footage from another camera, the suspect stops at 1:53 p.m. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out an object. He is seen holding and twisting something in his hand, but the poor quality of the footage makes it difficult to determine what it is. Police suspect he pulled out a knife, which he then used to kill Aisling. A forensic expert concluded that Aisling was killed with a small serrated knife, as the wounds had jagged edges. The man was seen again on surveillance footage at around 2:55 p.m., just as Aisling began training on the trail. Police discovered that the suspect had been wandering around the area, apparently looking for victims, as he occasionally focused on different women. He followed these women at a distance but lost interest until he came across Aisling, whom he decided to attack. Unfortunately, the surveillance cameras did not capture high-quality images that could help identify the criminal. Hours after the attack, a suspect was arrested based on information from witnesses. The suspect, Griot Keegan, is a 39-year-old Romanian immigrant who has lived in Ireland for 23 years and has no criminal record. He matched the person seen on surveillance cameras and found near the scene of the attack. At the police station, he vehemently denied any involvement in the incident. While police were questioning him, police obtained a search warrant and thoroughly searched his house, but found no evidence of his guilt. Griot maintained that there had been a mistake. He provided an alibi that was verified. He had been in a store making a purchase, which was confirmed by his receipt and surveillance footage. After that, he was seen walking along the south bank of the canal while the murder occurred on the north bank. The suspect's fingerprints and DNA samples were collected to compare with skin particles found under the Aisling's nails and on the bicycle, but there was no match. This confirmed that he was not involved in the crime. He was cleared of all suspicions and released. However, for some time, he and his family received threats as local residents still viewed him as a murderer. He was temporarily provided with alternative housing, and the police issued a public statement clarifying that Griot was not connected to the crime. Only after this did the public stop harassing him. This case received wide publicity across the country. The local community was outraged by the attack on Aisling and called on the police to quickly identify and arrest the perpetrators responsible for the tragic death of a talented young woman in broad daylight. For days, police have been trying to piece together clues, and the situation has taken a surprising turn. On the evening following the attack, a 30-year-old man named Josef Puska was admitted to a hospital in Dublin with abdominal injuries. Josef was originally from a small village in Slovakia. He left school at 16 without finishing his education and spent most of his life working as a laborer in the Czech Republic. Although he faced challenges in his lifestyle and at school, Josef was not involved with bad influences, had no criminal record, and was generally seen as a positive individual. In 2015, he moved to Dublin, Ireland, where he and his wife planned to settle permanently. He continued his work as a builder, and during their time there, they welcomed 5 children. Everything seemed to be going well until he suffered a back injury at work. After his recovery, Josef found that he could not return to his previous activities. The back injury was more severe than he had anticipated, leading him to receive disability benefits. He spent a significant amount of time in the hospital, and afterward, he relied on state support. The financial situation was tight, so his wife had to work. Josef had limited proficiency in Irish and struggled with English, which made it difficult for him to communicate with medical staff. When he went to the hospital the day after Aisling's murder, he needed an interpreter for assistance. Thanks to the interpreter, Josef explained that he was in Blanchardstown the previous day, January 12th. He took a taxi there and noticed he was being followed as soon as he arrived, but he did not think much of it since it was daytime. Suddenly, the attackers assaulted him, stabbing him multiple times in the stomach before they ran away. He managed to get home, where he informed his family about the incident and called for an ambulance. Doctors discovered cuts on Josef's hands, signs of defensive wounds. He had multiple stab wounds in his abdomen and received painkillers before a 2-hour surgery. The surgery was completed around 10 o'clock. The doctors concluded that Josef's injuries were from stab wounds inflicted by a small knife, but they were not life-threatening. He remained in the hospital for several days to recover. As part of their protocol, the doctors informed the police about the incident. Officers came to speak with Josef, who was the victim of another attack. Police suspected that the same criminal who attacked Aisling might also be responsible for Josef's injuries. During the conversation, Josef's behavior became increasingly awkward and suspicious. He seemed confused, struggled to recall simple details, and appeared noticeably nervous. Police began to question whether this unemployed man could be connected to Aisling's murder. The next day, the police returned to the hospital to continue questioning and gather more details. This time, Josef gave more specific answers. He explained that he had taken a taxi to the city to meet a woman he had met online. Yosef then revealed that he was married with 5 children but did not want his wife to know about his secret encounters. It was later discovered that he had registered on several dating websites and was regularly seeing different women. His wife remained unaware of his affair, as Yosef was very careful to keep it a secret. The police asked Yosef if he owned a bicycle. He replied that he had a green bicycle that he had used for a long time. However, when they inquired whether he had been riding it on the day of the murder, Yosef started to stutter and claimed that his bicycle had been stolen over 2 weeks ago. He had not reported the theft to the police, which raised suspicions. Yosef then appeared increasingly anxious, prompting police to leave his hospital room. The police also discovered that he had been near the canal around 6 p.m. that same day. They obtained a warrant to search his apartment, allowing them to collect his clothing and mobile phone for forensic analysis. They called Yosef to inform him of this. Sensing something was amiss, he directly asked the police, through an interpreter, if he was a suspect. The officers reassured him that they were merely trying to clarify the situation and needed to conduct an examination. This conversation occurred over the phone. After the police answered, the Yosef paused for a long moment. Then he turned to the translator and asked him to accurately relay his words to the police officer. Yosef admitted that he had killed the girl by the canal, but he insisted that it was unintentional and an accident. Later the Yosef addressed the police directly. He explained that he was riding his bicycle along a path when he encountered an unfamiliar girl. He had a knife in his hand and accidentally cut her in the neck after losing his balance. She became angry, which frightened Yosef, and he claimed he struck her in the stomach with an object that resembled a knife. He said he tried to remain calm, hoping the girl would settle down. However, she began screaming and threatening him even more, forcing Yosef to defend himself. He then attacked her, repeatedly stabbing her in the neck with his knife. She fought back desperately, but he was able to overpower her. The police were taken aback by his phone confession, finding the story hard to believe. It seemed implausible that Yosef could accidentally stab the victim in the neck before she attacked him. They questioned how Aisling could have had a knife. Yosef expressed fear of retaliation. He believed that if Aisling's friends and relatives learned of the incident, they might harm his children and wife. He asked the police to keep the names of his family members confidential. The police assured Yosef that he would not face prosecution as he would soon be arrested and put on trial. After being discharged from hospital, he was immediately arrested for murder. Afterward, the Yosef changed his story and refused to confess. Despite this, the prosecutor's office viewed him as the only person who could have harmed Aisling that day. They decided to seek the maximum punishment for the murderer. The initial trial date was set for June 2023, but there were several delays, and it wasn't until October 2023 that the prosecution presented the case to the jury. During the trial, prosecutors played surveillance footage showing an attacker who looked like Yosef cycling along a path near the canal for hours before targeting Aisling. His actions were typical of a predator looking for prey. Forensic experts found traces of DNA under Aisling's fingernails, suggesting she fought back and injured her attacker. DNA from tissue samples matched Yosef, and his fingerprints were found on a green bicycle. All witnesses who saw the attacker that day identified him as Yosef. New evidence emerged during the investigation, particularly from one of Yosef's friends, a Slovakian bus driver. On the night of January 12th, while working, he encountered Yosef, who had severe scratches on his stomach. Concerned, the driver offered Yosef a ride home. Yosef mentioned he had gotten into a fight but did not provide details about the incident. During the drive, the bus driver repeatedly questioned Yosef about what had happened, but Yosef avoided giving clear answers and kept holding his stomach, which was bleeding. The driver grew increasingly worried, suspecting that the injuries might be linked to the ethnic cleansing events happening at that time, as there were widespread expressions of hatred against other nationalities. To deflect his friend's questions, Yosef concocted a story about being attacked by a masked man, claiming he couldn't identify the attacker because he hadn't seen his face before and didn't know him. Yosef attempted to portray himself as a hero, claiming he had seen a masked stranger attacking a woman near the canal. Yosef claimed he was stabbed multiple times as he tried to approach the bleeding girl. He became frightened when he realized what had happened and then fled. Despite being suspected of murder, he began to insist that he was actually the savior, having been injured in a fight with the real attacker. However, this new account does not clarify how his DNA was found under Aisling's fingernails or his fingerprints on the green bike he left behind. Yosef's defense argued that his false confession about the attack on Aisling resulted from the painkillers he received in the hospital, which caused him to feel euphoric and led him to speak to himself. Yosef stated that he was under the influence of these drugs when the police began their interrogation. However, doctors who treated Yosef contradicted this claim. They stated that he only received a minimal dose of the medication, meaning it could not have significantly affected him by the time he made his confession. The prosecution highlighted that Yosef had changed his testimony multiple times, making his statements unreliable. However, this posed a challenge for the prosecution because Yosef had no history of violence, especially against women. There were no indications of aggression or cruelty in his behavior, and he had no connection to Aisling, raising questions about his motive for the attack. The prosecution argued that the incident was not a result of personal issues. The trial lasted 3 weeks, after which a jury of 12 members returned their verdict. They deliberated for 3 hours before finding Yosef Puska guilty of the murder of Aisling Murphy. As a result, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The circumstances surrounding Aisling's murder shocked the nation. Just days after the tragedy, protests were held across Ireland in support of the victim's family, and the case shocked the nation. During the investigation, police determined that Yosef had attacked Aisling without any apparent motive. He did not know her. He appeared to be a predator who had been searching for a victim for hours. Unfortunately, Aisling fell victim to a monster. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the heartbreaking case of a beautiful woman, Julie Scully. Julie Marie Scully, an American woman, gave up everything to pursue love, but just a few months later, her body was found in a horrific state in a remote lake in Turkey. What turned her beautiful life into an international sensation case? Let's follow the case today. Julie was the daughter of Julia and John Scully. To understand her story better, let's consider her parents' situation. Julia was born in 1943 on an Indian reservation in New Mexico, home to the second largest Native American tribe in the United States. Life on the reservation was extremely challenging, with no electricity or running water and limited job opportunities due to widespread alcoholism. Many residents turned to substance abuse as a coping mechanism. At the age of 12, Julia's parents sent her to a boarding school to help her learn English and adapt to life outside the reservation. After moving to the city, she began to fit in as an average American and found work at a mental health facility. However, she became addicted to substances. Later, Julia met a police officer named John. They got married just 2 days before the 1-year anniversary of their meeting. John took a job as a patrolman in one of the most dangerous areas of North Philadelphia. In January 1969, Julia became pregnant, and they welcomed their daughter, Julie. As Julie grew, she formed a very close bond with her father, and relatives noted that she would do anything to earn his approval. Father and daughter spent a lot of time together fishing, while Julia often felt sidelined in family life. During these times, she struggled with feelings of being an outsider. Although Julia hid her substance addiction, her erratic behavior raised concerns among those around her. Things worsened as Julia began to use more potent illegal additives. Despite this, on November 10, 1969, Julie's brother, John Patrick Scully, was born. The new baby quickly became the center of attention for their parents, leaving Julie feeling unloved and neglected. Meanwhile, Julia's substance abuse continued, and she fell into a deep depression. In 1973, overwhelmed, she took an entire pack of sleeping pills. Fortunately, John found her in time, administered first aid, and called for medical help. Julia was revived, but not only did the family learn of her addiction, the situation deteriorated further. She began to resemble a shell of her former self. Soon after, Julia attempted self-harm again due to depression, but this time, she also was saved. The issues between her parents did not go unnoticed by their children, especially by Julie, who was 9 years old at the time. During her birthday party, friends gathered to celebrate, but in the middle of the festivities, their father left to see his mistress. He had been having an affair for a while, viewing it as an escape from his growing disgust for his dependent wife. He stayed with Julia only for the sake of the children. During the party, the mistress arrived at their home to pick up John, and Julie saw her leaving with him. He seemed completely unconcerned that his secret was now obvious. This revelation hit Julie hard, and Julia began to blame herself for the situation. Julia struggled to understand what was really happening. During this time, Julie had once been an excellent student, started to fall to a C average in school. John then decided to transfer her to a new school in Kensington. In here, Julie, a bright and beautiful girl, became very popular, but also fell in with a bad crowd. She started skipping school, and her grades continued to decline. By this time, she was 12 years old and already looked attractive, attracting the attention of many boys. All this was aggravated by the fact that their family lived in a disadvantaged area, which made her parents increasingly afraid for Julie, fearing she could become a victim of the addiction. One evening, Julie's friends were supposed to spend the night, but when the mother came to check on them, the schoolgirls were not in the room. Concerned, Julia contacted emergency services, and the police eventually located them in downtown Philadelphia. Julie's relationship with her mother was deteriorating, resulting in frequent arguments. Her rebellious behavior also troubled her father. Julia entered treatment for her addiction. During Julia's absence, the home environment became more peaceful. However, despite Julie's early attempts to please her father, her rebellious nature intensified. She continued to skip classes and perform poorly academically due to spending more time with friends. When John learned of this, he was very upset. At the age of 14, Julie informed her father that she wanted to drop out of school. This decision likely stemmed from her feeling ignored by her parents. She was attractive and often the center of attention at parties, making her prioritize fun over her father's approval. By the age of 14, Julie had started living a sexual life. After graduating from high school, her parents began considering her future and special education needs. John helped her gain admission to a prestigious engineering school, known for its strict selection process. He personally spoke to the director to ensure she would be accepted without facing competition, emphasizing that she was the daughter of an indigenous person, which he hoped would earn her some concessions. In the fall of 1983, his efforts succeeded, and Julie enrolled in the engineering program. Meanwhile, her brother chose a different path. He joined the Navy as soon as he turned 16. During this time, Julie decided she was content with her life and dropped out of school to pursue financial independence. She began working and soon met a boyfriend. He was 6 years older than her. Their relationship progressed quickly, and they married in November 1985. 1985, just a few months before Julie turned 18. Although marrying provided her with financial support and emotional stability, their union was kept secret, even from her father. When John eventually found out, he supported the marriage, believing it was a better choice for Julie than living with a dependent parent. Unfortunately, the marriage ended in 1988, and Julie had to move back in with her mother. Despite finding a new job, she did not contribute to her mother's living expenses. Julie became more beautiful than ever, attracting attention every time she was in public. Many people even mistook her for a model and often asked if she was one. Over time, she started to leverage her beauty. Though she felt fragile and vulnerable inside, she was desperately searching for love, but only found brief connections. Many men invited her out on dates and to various events. This trend continued in July 1989, when she attended a stylish party at a yacht owners club. There, she met Timothy "Tim" Nist, a man 11 years her senior. He was a successful businessman who owned his own yacht. In the early 1980s, he started a landscape design company, and his business thrived during the boom of the U.S. real estate market. Julie and Tim's relationship progressed rapidly, but it soon became evident that Julie was very jealous. One day, when Tim was at a bar with another girl, Julie arrived and immediately hit him, leaving a bruise on his face. She also attacked the girl, who was actually Tim's longtime secretary and just an employee helping with the business. Although the situation was tense, the conflict was eventually resolved. Besides, Julie aspired to be a model and saw an advertisement for a beauty contest in a newspaper. Eager to participate, she and Tim gathered her best photos to submitted them to the magazine hosting the contest. Unfortunately, they later discovered that the contest was a scam. The magazine used fake ads to collect free photos for their men's section, which was on the last page. One day, Tim arrived at his office to find his secretary absent. To his surprise, Julie was sitting at her desk with a friendly smile, claiming that the secretary would no longer come to work and that Julie had taken over her job. This arrangement allowed Julie to work from home, giving her more freedom and financial independence. Meanwhile, she kept checking her email to see if another magazine had responded to the beauty pageant, but there was no response at all, which made her very frustrated. Eventually, feeling cheated out of her prize, she went to a magazine's office and confronted the editor, demanding an explanation for the lack of recognition for her supposed win. In the end, the editor accepted her photos and promised to include them in the next issue. Julie told everyone about what happened and began to prepare for the competition, which later took place in an elite hotel. At the contest, 12 finalists participated, including Julie. Unfortunately, the judges selected other contestants and only one person voted for her. Despite this setback, Julie formed a friendship with Cheryl Chouplas Hood, the magazine editor, and became this magazine's face, appearing on billboards throughout the city. This exposure increased her popularity, leading to numerous modeling job offers. Julie quickly gained fame, and her career flourished until the fall of 1990. She continued to work for SEMA while winning awards in smaller beauty contests. However, failures awaited her on the big podium. On November 16, 1991, Julie married Tim when she was 23 years old. They enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle and did not deny themselves anything until 1997. Julie's modeling career continued to grow, leading to more income and television appearances. However, she also began to struggle with alcohol abuse. Their marriage had its ups and downs, but overall, they shared love and understanding. Tim wanted children, and they had the financial means to support a family, but Julie was hesitant, fearing it might jeopardize her modeling career. In February 1995, she became pregnant. Despite her friends' concerns, she continued to drink and smoke during this time. On November 26, 1996, she gave birth to a daughter named Katie, which profoundly transformed her life, which Julie willingly accepted. During this time, Julia overcame her addictions and started to actively support her granddaughter. However, they frequently argued about parenting. Soon after, Julie began to struggle with postpartum depression, feeling unhappy because her pregnancy had affected her figure. She became withdrawn and didn't make an effort to return to her former self. Around the same time, her relationship with Tim started to deteriorate, especially in April of that year. They were compelled to see a family psychologist. Julie felt that the therapist favored Tim, but the therapist was actually trying to help her confront her issues and past traumas. Ultimately, the psychologist concluded that Tim was not spending enough time with Julie, putting their marriage at risk. Julie felt lonely and started reaching out to her friends. She came home intoxicated on November 1. This is the 7th year of Tim's annual cruise tradition, which they had maintained since their wedding. This year, they decided to move the trip up to celebrate the Christmas holidays. The cruise was intended to strengthen Julie and Tim's relationship. They left Katie with her grandparents and flew to San Juan, Puerto Rico, where they boarded a cruise ship. Almost immediately, a man named George Skiadopoulos, who worked in the ship's engineering department, noticed Julie. Although he held a low-ranking position, he introduced himself as the captain. The next day, he had made a bet with a friend that he could start a romantic relationship with Julie. At just 22 years old and fresh out of college, George was at the beginning of his engineering career, but he looked respectable enough for Julie to believe him. He falsely claimed to be 28 and fabricated a few accomplishments to impress her. At that time, Julie was 29 years old, and she quickly became close to George. Tim noticed their interactions but was accustomed to Julie being friendly with strangers, so he didn't think much of it and felt no jealousy. Before a party, George offered Julie a tour of the engine room. During the tour, they shared a kiss, but nothing more happened afterward. When Julie returned home, she excitedly told a family friend about her feelings, thinking it was just a brief attraction, since she believed she would never see George again. However, not long after, George sent Julie a seemingly innocent letter, and they began talking on the phone daily. He tried to persuade her that Tim wasn't good enough for her. These conversations were not hidden from Tim. He caught Julie a few times while she was on the phone, but chose to trust her without questioning what they discussed. This situation left Julie feeling conflicted. She was torn between the stability of the family and new sensations with a young lover whom she missed so much, which caused her to become more distant from her husband and daughter. Noticing the change in her behavior, Tim grew concerned and wanted to mend their relationship. On January 3, 1941, he planned a surprise birthday party for her 30th birthday. The celebration went well, with many friends attending. During the party, Julie requested another cruise as a gift, specifying a particular ship and date. Tim was unaware of her true intentions to meet George again. He agreed to her request. On February 13, Julie went on a cruise where she met George. After some intimate moments and returning home, Julie excitedly shared her experience with her friend Tony, who is also the godfather of Katie. Although he was trustworthy, it was hard for Tony to keep this secret to himself. Feeling a deep longing for George, Julie decided to visit him secretly. She framed the trip as a vacation with her mother and daughter. She revealed to her mother about her secret relationship, which led to disapproval. But this could not stop Julie. Initially, the plan was for Julie, Julia, and Katie to go to Florida together. However, by March 26, she left them behind and traveled to Puerto Rico, where she betrayed love of her husband. Upon returning, Julie began to communicate more openly with George. She would frequently talk to him on the phone, send flirty love letters via email, and even create a video sharing snippets of her life. All of this she did without hiding it from Tim, with whom she still lived. Using her husband's earnings, she started going to parties and drinking regularly. Tim noticed these changes and suggested that they see a family psychologist after 7 years of marriage. One day, Julie expressed her desire to break up with Tim, but he opposed the idea. She owned a share in Tim's business, which was generating about $1 million annually. Julie was in dire need of finances as George was planning military service, which in Greece lasts 20 months. She attempted to help George obtain a visa to the USA, but by that time, she could no longer afford it. Struggling with emotional issues, she started taking antidepressants, which made George very angry, and he forbade her from continuing the medication. To impress her new boyfriend, Julie decided to get in shape. However, she had trouble sleeping due to taking sleeping pills and other strong medications, which led her to lose about 10 kg. She hoped to return to modeling to earn money, but George was very jealous and opposed her pursuing this career. Consequently, Julie had to abandon her plans. No one supported her relationship with this Greek man, not even Cheryl, who had previously shown interest in her. In a separate incident, Tim was unable to access a project document. When Julie refused to let him into her room, he had to call the police for help. Despite her resistance, he retrieved what he needed for work. Julie became paranoid, believing that Tim had hired a detective to spy on her. The tension in their home escalated, and it seemed inevitable that they were heading toward a divorce. By midsummer, George and Julie secretly got engaged while they were in the United States. This was done secretly, although she didn't hide from anyone that she was going to move to Greece. During this time, Tim started receiving monthly bills of $67 for international phone calls. Eventually, he discovered that she had been unfaithful to him by an engineer from a cruise ship, and they had been communicating with him behind his back. This revelation made Tim furious, and he decided to expedite the divorce process to eliminate any complications. In response, Julie attempted to restrict Tim's communication with Katie. She aimed to gain full custody so she could leave for another country without any obstacles, which Tim strongly opposed. While they was trying to resolve their issues, Julie's lover George informed her that he had quit his job and planned to visit her in New Jersey. During this time, Julie was under significant stress due to ongoing conflicts with Tim, which even caused her hair to start falling out. However, she believed that all this was due to separation from her beloved. Additionally, she became increasingly paranoid and jealous, demanding constant communication and obsessing over other women in George's life. When George arrived in New Jersey, their relationship took on a more chaotic tone. He frequently asked Julie for money, pressuring her to spend more than she could afford. Because of this, she was forced to take money from Tim, while she completely limited him communication with their daughter. Tim went weeks without seeing her, which drove him to frustration. Meanwhile, George constantly deceived Julie about his financial situation and employment status. It was surprising how unattractive this man was, the beautiful Julie, who literally crouched before him and was ready to give up her well-established life for him. Julie's friends and family were puzzled by her behavior. They tried to convince her to rethink her feelings, as they couldn't comprehend why she would fall for a bald, unemployed man with rotten teeth who was manipulative, deceitful, and excessively jealous. Despite their concerns, Julie seemed infatuated with him. She planned to use her divorce settlement to pay for a professional hair transplant for her boyfriend and fix her own teeth. When Tim learned about her plans, he was outraged, especially since he felt Julie was involving Katie in this situation. He threatened that if she attempted to leave, he would take Katie away, and she would never see their child again. This threat likely dampened Julie's enthusiasm momentarily. She even told her friends that she had ended her relationship with George. However, this was only a temporary setback. A few weeks later, she went to Greece with George to further develop their relationship. During this time, Julie met the parents of George, and they enjoyed the weekend. Because of the religious views of the boyfriend's parents, Julie was forced to hide her marriage and her daughter, as well as her modeling past. When she returned home, she dreamed of a future with her lover. On December 1st, she planned to leave Tim and their shared home. That day, she also left Katie and checked into a hotel. After using a significant amount of psychoactive drugs, Julie traveled to Greece on December 8, 1998. While there, she and her partner made plans for marriage and their life together. George convinced her to open a joint bank account, claiming she needed help with the language barrier. In her infatuation, Julie deposited $80,000 into the account and left an additional $18,000 in cash for expenses. This was all the money she had, and then she vanished without a trace. On January 8, George called Julie's friend to report that she was missing. He said she was supposed to meet him near McDonald's for a snack but never arrived, despite him waiting for several hours. At that time, they didn't have mobile phones to reach her. After a lengthy search, George contacted the police to report his fiancée's disappearance. Shortly before these events, Julie called her friend to express how much she missed Katie and to share that she was having issues with her fiancé, George. The friend sensed that Julie was considering leaving George, and she thought that Julie would return to the US soon. However, Julie never came back. Amid this, George's call was concerning. He informed her friend that Julie had disappeared and left her passport in the car, which the police later took. The problem was that George couldn't locate the officer who had taken the document, making his story seem suspicious. In response, the friend contacted Tim, who was the only one who could provide assistance. Tim quickly understood that Julie was in trouble. The last time she had reached out to her family in the US was on January 7, and since then, no one had heard from her. Julie's mother described George as pathetic. Not only was he unattractive, but he also seemed to lack self-control. There was an incident where George became aggressive towards Julie, when during an argument with Julie, he yelled at her, grabbed her by the throat and pushed her against the wall. He only released her when he heard the threat of police involvement. At this time, Julie attempted to end the relationship. Following this, Julia called the police, and George was deported. But then, despite the circumstances, Julie traveled to Greece to support her boyfriend. She defended him in every way possible, even taking responsibility for the attack. When she learned that Julie was missing, Julia suspected that her daughter's boyfriend was involved in her disappearance. George pretended to help with the search for Julie. During this time, Julie's family tried to reach the American embassy in Athens, but they faced a significant language barrier since no one at the Greek police stations involved in the investigation spoke English. In the United States, the FBI became involved in the case. It was revealed that Julie's passport had been with George the entire time, although he claimed he found it later. When George learned that the FBI was now investigating, he changed his story and said that Julie's documents had been stolen. His behavior grew increasingly suspicious. He attempted to withdraw money from their joint account, but was unsuccessful. The couple was scheduled to get married on January 23, 1999. During this time, news outlets were covering the story of the missing American woman. George became agitated when he spoke on the phone with Julie's friend, who had alerted the media, George insisting he was innocent. He even gave statements to the press and participated in interviews to defend himself. 16 days later, George, the main suspect, was in the interrogation room. He continued to stick to the story he had shared with the media. However, after 4 hours of questioning, the police got him to confess to killing his lover. He claimed that it was an accident. George seemed to genuinely regret the incident, even shedding tears during the interrogation. Despite this, his account was filled with inconsistencies. At times, he insisted that Julie had not disappeared, only to later admit his guilt and then deny any involvement again. George explained that after moving to Greece, Julie quickly became unhappy and missed her home. She expressed a strong desire to return, and despite George's attempts to support her, her distress only deepened, which worried him. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Julie was constantly in tears. Furthermore, George's mother discovered that Julie had an ex-husband and a daughter in America, which made her feel disgusted with Julie. She openly expressed her disapproval to George. He was ultimately persuaded by his mother to leave Julie with such a complicated past. Their relationship was fraught with arguments, and they eventually were evicted from their hotel due to their conflicts. However, George exacerbated the situation. He prevented her from contacting her family and friends and physically abused her. It became evident that his mother struggled with schizophrenia and frequently required hospitalization. A lot of her issues seemed to have been passed down to George, who had an inflated sense of self-worth. As a result, he exhibited arrogant behavior. His manipulative tendencies were often noticed by friends and family. He disappeared at the slightest disagreement and immediately attacked his beloved. Besides, there was an incident where George's mother herself had a badly injured hand. But she justified herself by saying that she accidentally cut herself. Despite the abuse, Julie remained in the relationship. On January 8, 1999, the couple embarked on a long trip to Athens. As they drove along a deserted two-lane highway, their calm conversation spiraled into another argument. George eventually stopped in a remote area of the road where they were isolated from other drivers. George got out of the car and immediately attacked Julie, choking her in an attempt to silence her screams. George later told the police that it felt like he was watching the incident from outside his body. He felt completely powerless and couldn't stop until Julie showed no signs of life. Although he claimed the attack lasted only a few seconds, forensic experts indicated that strangulation typically takes at least 3 minutes. Afterward, George was in shock and contemplated burning her body and scattering the ashes into the sea from a cliff, intending to jump afterward to be with her. However, he ultimately abandoned this plan. Instead, he found himself in an interrogation room, which revealed his guilt. George claimed he had tried to take his own life using an air gun, jumping in front of a truck, and through an overdose of medication, but he was unsuccessful. Following the murder, he treated her body with indifference. He placed her in the trunk of his car and drove to the nearest gas station, where he purchased gasoline. He then returned to the scene, dragged her body away from the road near 2 small lakes, poured gasoline on her, and attempted to set her on fire. However, the fire didn't ignite because it started to rain. At one point, he thought about throwing her body into the lake, but instead placed the charred remains back in the trunk and drove to his grandmother's house. George discovered a large suitcase intended for travel and decided to pack the body inside it. By this time, rigor mortis had already set in, and the body would not bend. Additionally, the head would not fit into the suitcase, so George resorted to cutting it off. He grabbed the head by the hair and raised it to the level of his face, and later confessed to the police that he was horrified by the sight of her vacant eyes. Yet he still found her beautiful. He kissed her on the lips before placing the body into the suitcase. Afterward, he burned the suitcase and discarded it in a swamp, leaving the head behind. George then traveled to Kavala and threw Julie's head into the Aegean Sea. Tim and his family were informed of George's confession 19 days after Julie's disappearance. George, Julie's lover and intended husband, guided detectives to the murder site, where they discovered her remains. Tim traveled to Greece to bring her body back to her homeland. During this time, George confessed to the crime on live television. His mother suffered a stroke upon learning of his actions. Tim's father even remarked that George should have died alongside Julie. Despite this, many articles unfairly blamed Julie for the tragedy. Greek authorities described this murder as one of the most horrific cases known at the time. George's lawyers attempted to argue that he was insane, citing his mother's schizophrenia as a possible reason for his mental state. At one point, George expressed a desire for the death penalty, but Greece does not have capital punishment. In the United States, Tim became a source of support for Julie's family and friends. Despite Julie's infidelity, he proved to be a decent person. Friends of Julie, who remembered her fondly, believed that George initially exploited her for financial gain. When he found out that her husband was rich, he forced her to divorce for a tidy sum that the woman had to invest in his business. Before her death, Julie realized George's true intentions and decided not to invest in his projects, a decision that ultimately cost her life. George's trial began on November 27, 1999. Since 2009, cases in Greece have been heard by 3 judges instead of juries, which has expedited the justice process. Notably, no defense witnesses were present during the hearings. On December 6, the court found George guilty and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although it seemed that justice had been served, the Greek legal system faltered. In 2002, George appealed his conviction, claiming he was insane at the time of the murder. His sentence was subsequently reduced to 23 years, and he was granted the right to appeal again. By 2007, he was released and now lives with his new family in Kavala. The case of Julie Scully is a heartbreaking tragedy, with haunting details of the complex relationship. From a happy marriage, she began an affair with George Skiadopoulos, which led to irreparable arguments and conflicts that eventually led to her death. The case is not only a story of personal loss, but also a reflection of the complex elements of love, trust, and power in relationships. The media and public continue to investigate to clarify what really happened, but the story of Julie will forever be a painful reminder of the tragic consequences of toxic relationships. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Robert Pointer. Robert Pointer was known to be a kind man and to help others when they needed it. His children were always his top priority. Robert had 3 daughters, Grace being the youngest from his second marriage. Robert had 2 daughters from his first marriage, his eldest daughter Nicole and his second daughter Natalie. After about 20 years of marriage to Robert, Amy Pointer began to notice changes in his behavior that made her suspicious. Robert began to leave the house more often and spend more time away from his family. Their eldest daughter, Nicole, soon discovered that her father had a second cell phone. It turned out that he was secretly dating another woman named Chasey. At the time they met, Chasey was working as a nurse and they were introduced by a mutual friend. Chasey fell in love with him and decided to pursue the relationship, despite knowing that he was married with children. Chasey soon discovered that Robert was having marital problems, which led her to frequently visit the fire station to talk to him. Despite being married for 20 years, Robert succumbed to temptation and began an affair with Chasey, eventually leaving his wife, Amy. In December 2007, Robert officially began dating Chasey, and by May 2009, she was pregnant. They married on December 28. At the time, Robert was 40 years old, while Chasey was 22. She claimed that she was very happy with her husband. Unfortunately, this happiness did not last long. Over time, her feelings declined, and she began to believe that marriage was a mistake. Chasey later described her relationship with Robert as a foolish decision and a mistake of youth. On September 9, 2016, Chasey called 911 in a state of panic and distress. She asked the police to rush to a rural road, 38 kilometers from the city, where she was staying with her husband. During the call, She expressed her concern for his safety. When the police arrived around midnight, they found a car parked nearby with Chasey sitting in the car. She had blood on her shoulders and body, but she did not appear to be injured. According to Chasey, while waiting for the police, she held her husband's head. She stayed by his side the entire time. In the car was Robert Pointer, who was injured. Chasey had blood on her shoulders, shirt, and legs, but it was not hers and she was not injured. Police quickly discovered a wound to his head. Chasey reported that she saw an attacker dressed in dark clothing attack Robert. She was still terrified that the attacker might return, but she couldn't get out because the car was stuck. In addition, her husband needed urgent medical help. Sadly, by the time the ambulance arrived, Robert was dead, and it was too late to save him. Chasey shared that it was impossible to understand who would attack them in the dark. Robert. Her husband was a good man, a firefighter for many years, and had become a captain. She didn't see the attacker's face and couldn't provide any details about them. Overwhelmed, she began to have difficulty breathing. Eventually, a doctor stabilized her breathing, allowing her to recount the events leading up to the murder. That evening, Chasey, 29, was on her way to meet her husband at a fast food restaurant in Rossi, Texas. She was late and got lost in the dark, missed a turn, and drove 5 kilometers in the opposite direction. When she realized her mistake, she decided not to turn around and continued driving. She spotted a country road leading into a field and thought it might help her get through. Unfortunately, the road was muddy and her car got stuck. She couldn't get out. In fact, it was a road that farmers use tractors on. It was unusual for Chasey to choose this route, as it was clearly not suitable for her car. Chasey then called Robert and knew he was nearby, so she asked him for help. He quickly ran to help her. When he arrived, he parked along the side of the road. Chasey, who was waiting for him, pointed out where her car was parked. He left the car and headed toward his wife's car, moving into the darkness. Chasey stayed behind, but after a few minutes, she heard an explosion. Fearing for Robert's safety, she ran to her car and found him injured and slumped in the passenger seat. In a panic, Chasey called the police. While calling the police, she noticed a suspicious dark figure in the distance between some trees. She believed it was the killer. Fearing for her life, she realized that this man had no reason to kill Robert, which made her worry that she might be the attacker's target. Despite her fear, she did not want to leave Robert, so she chose to get into the car with him. Robert Pointer, 47, was a respected firefighter. He worked at a fire station near University Park in Dallas, Texas for 19 years, eventually becoming a captain and saving many lives. Robert's sudden death was a huge loss to his children and family. The police needed to uncover the truth behind his death. Robert's young wife, Chasey, had a hard time getting over the tragedy and gave vague and inconsistent statements to the police. The officers who arrived at the scene began to doubt her credibility. On a remote road, an attacker inexplicably decided to kill a stranger. Robert was attacked as soon as he entered the area. It was unclear why the killer did not attack Chasey. The police found this puzzling. They saw no struggle or motive for the attack. The killer emerged silently from the shadows and attacked Robert while he was in his car. Chasey provided information about her marriage and her relationship with Robert. She explained that the problems had begun years ago, almost breaking up their marriage. A significant concern for her was Robert's intention to gain custody of their daughter if they divorced. Chasey spoke to the police for over an hour, and as the conversation progressed, she shared more details, not only about her relationship with Robert, but also about the assault. Chasey explained that their marriage had deteriorated. They had been sleeping in separate rooms for 3 years. She expressed that she did not feel true love and believed that Robert still loved his ex-wife. Chasey began to claim that Robert was a cruel man because he had been taking testosterone injections to increase his hormone levels. She claimed that these injections made him more aggressive and that he frequently used force on her. Chasey accused Robert of humiliating her in various ways, including verbal and physical abuse. Eventually, the police decided to release her on bail while they continued to investigate the case. The police spoke to Robert's first wife, Amy, who disagreed with Chasey's claims. She said that Robert had never had a testosterone problem and that being cruel or irritable was not in his character at all. This view was supported by his children, relatives, and co-workers. Notably, his daughter shared that she lived with her father and stepmother for 6 months when she was 16 and had never witnessed him lose his temper or act cruelly. This view was shared by his other daughters. Chasey later attempted to deny the accusations against her, arguing that the daughters from Robert's first marriage had been hostile to her from the start because they viewed her as a homewrecker. She explained that she chose not to report the domestic violence to the police because she did not want to damage Robert's career. Chasey maintained that she had tried to save their relationship. During her interactions and interviews with Robert's daughter, Natalie, she said that she had discovered that Chasey had been unfaithful to her father. Natalie discovered evidence of the affair on Chasey's computer. There was an open social media tab showing conversations with multiple men. After this discovery, Natalie began to realize that her stepmother frequently left the house for several hours while her father worked the night shift at the fire department. Meanwhile, their sister would wake up at night, crying and calling for her mother. Natalie was furious and spoke to her father, presenting clear evidence of the situation. This revelation was a significant shock to Robert, and he considered filing for divorce. However, he ultimately decided against it, choosing instead to try to save his marriage. According to Robert's children, he did not want to leave Chasey for the sake of their young daughter. He made efforts to improve their relationship, but it seemed to be to no avail. Robert then installed a surveillance camera on the front door. Just 12 days before the murder, the camera recorded an unknown man with Chasey. The police began to suspect Chasey. Despite the police's skepticism, she continued to tell her story, constantly adding details that seemed inconsistent. With each conversation with the police, more inconsistencies emerged in her story, making it less believable. Interestingly, she publicly referred to Michael Garza as her lover. During Chasey's conversations with the police, she often paused for long periods before answering police questions. Her interactions with the police seemed like an attempt to mislead them. She claimed that Robert had decided to file for divorce after discovering she was seeing Michael. Robert confided in his friends at the fire department, who suggested that he consider ending the marriage because they could see that he and Chasey were not compatible. Robert still held out hope of saving the relationship and decided to take his family on a vacation to Mexico. However, the trip did not go as planned, and on the second day, a conflict arose. Robert noticed that Chasey was talking excitedly on the phone and believed that she was still in contact with her lover and had little interest in enjoying their vacation. On Wednesday, they returned from Mexico, and Robert confessed that he could no longer stand the situation and filed for divorce. By Friday, Robert was murdered. After police questioned Chasey, she claimed that despite the affair, she still loved Robert and wanted to save their marriage. To that end, she had a date with Robert at a restaurant that night, hoping to reconnect. Chasey then repeated her story about a mysterious stranger attacking Robert. After 2 hours of questioning, Chasey changed her story and revealed that she knew the killer. It was her lover, Michael Garza, who was in the passenger seat of her car at the time of the murder. Chasey's story kept changing. She claimed that shortly before the tragedy, she had told Michael about Robert's anger issues. She shared the abuse she had suffered for years. This prompted Michael to attack Robert. On the night of the incident, Chasey suggested they scare Robert so he would stop mistreating her. They had planned to create a situation where the car would appear to be stuck on a deserted road. Chasey insisted that she did not see the weapon Michael was carrying, that it was not part of their plan. Michael said that he would wait for Robert and asked Chasey to call her husband. Now, Chasey said that Michael had set up the ambush. When her husband arrived, she noticed something touching. Robert was wearing the same perfume he had worn on their wedding day, which she thought was his way of trying to please her. Chasey joked about it, and Robert laughed. Although the atmosphere was light, her husband only had a few minutes to live. Chasey told the police that as soon as her husband got into the car, she yelled at him to stop. She claimed that she was trying to stop Michael from escalating the situation. She claimed she had no idea there was a weapon in the car, saying she had just realized something was wrong and wanted to stop a fight. However, shortly after she screamed, an explosion was heard. When Chasey called for help, Michael snatched the phone out of her hand and threw it on the ground before disappearing. After reviewing all the false information and false statements, the police concluded that Chasey was involved in the murder. They believed that she played a key role in the plan and was fully aware of what was going to happen. Chasey was then arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder. At the same time, the police began searching for Chasey's boyfriend, Michael. On September 15, 2016, Robert Pointer was buried. Firefighters from all over Texas attended his funeral. His family revealed that in his final days, he was actually ready to end his relationship with Chasey, as he seemed very tired of the way she treated him. About a week before his death, Robert contacted a divorce attorney. The day before the tragedy, he posted a distressing message on social media, expressing his fear of a surprise attack. During this time, he was selling the family home and seeking custody of his daughter from his second marriage. The next day, Robert died, and police believe it was more than just a coincidence. They believe it was a planned murder. Police discovered significant evidence on Chasey's cell phone and computer that suggested she was looking for someone to kill her husband. Numerous text messages were sent to Chasey's lovers, and police identified at least 4 men with whom she was having affairs at the time. Of these, Chasey realized that Michael was the most vulnerable. She then began to carry out her deception. Her strategy was to convince Michael that Robert was a danger to her. She portrayed herself as a victim, claiming that she had been subjected to domestic violence. Although she told a similar story to all 4 lovers, only Michael was manipulated. While on vacation in Mexico, Chasey texted him, expressing fear for her life. Chasey instructed Michael that if she did not return from the trip, he should contact the police and report her as a victim of Robert. In response to the text message, Michael stated that he would kill Robert. During questioning, Chasey explained that she thought it was a joke. Police also spoke with Chasey's other lover, Golden. He said that Chasey had told him alarming stories about Robert, claiming that her ex-husband was stalking her. However, Golden did not believe her and advised her to contact the police. Although Chasey claimed to have been abused, police were unable to find any evidence to support her accusations against Robert. Neighbors and relatives did not report any problems or domestic incidents. No one ever saw any bruises on Chasey, even at the time of her husband's death. Chasey was later examined and found no signs of physical abuse. People around him confirmed that Robert was one of the kindest people they knew. Police are working to clarify the details surrounding the incident. Michael had fled. Although police searched his home, he was nowhere to be found. However, Michael turned himself in the next day. He was charged with the murder of Robert Pointer. Michael was uncooperative and refused to talk to the police. At that time, the police did not have the murder weapon and were searching for it, but were unsuccessful. Fortunately, 5 weeks after the murder, a farmer reported finding a shotgun while plowing a field, located a few hundred yards from where Robert was killed. The shotgun was still loaded and the bullets matched the bullets that killed Robert. In addition, A shirt was found next to the murder weapon and its DNA was confirmed to be Michael's. The police contacted Chasey again and she eventually admitted that she knew about the existence of the murder weapon. However, she maintained that she had no involvement in the planning of the crime. On July 10, 2018, Michael Garza's trial began. During the hearing, Michael continued to maintain his innocence and made a surprising statement. He said that he had taken the weapon from his brother, but insisted that he had not intended to kill Robert. Instead, he had given it to Chasey at her request. Michael provided an alibi, saying that he was at his farm, a few dozen miles from the crime scene, tending to a sick cow at the time of the massacre. However, he was unable to provide his alibi. Despite his efforts to defend himself, the jury did not believe Michael. On July 20, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to 99 years in prison. The prosecutor's office claimed that Chasey was the one who orchestrated the massacre. It was clear that Michael could not have lured Robert to that remote country road alone. Chasey was an accomplice in the scheme. The prosecutor presented Chasey's text messages to expose Chasey's true intentions. She used Michael as a pawn, fooling him into thinking she truly loved him. In reality, he was naive. After Robert's murder and her interactions with the police, Chasey planned to spend the night with another lover, as revealed in her text messages. Chasey's attorney argued that it was an out-of-control accident and not Chasey's fault. The defense argued that if there had been a secret plan, the real culprit would not have called the police after the murder. Instead, they would try to cover up their actions. The prosecution argued that Chasey had acted out of fear. Although Chasey did not testify at trial, the jury saw video of her holding her head and saying, "Oh no, what have I done?" This was considered a confession in relation to her husband's murder. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Chasey Pointer guilty of murder and sentenced her to 30 years in prison. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jean-Pierre Triber. At approximately 3 p.m., on November 4, 2004, a woman named Maria went to a police station in Burgundy, France, to report the disappearance of her sister, Katia L'Herbier. Maria was worried because her sister had not been in touch for several days. Katia has not been to work since November 1st and has missed important meetings, which is very unusual. The last person to speak with Katia was a family member, Sonia L'Herbier. Katia had met her friend, Geraldine Girard, on November 1. Katia had planned to spend the weekend with her. Since that day, Geraldine had also gone missing. She was known for her punctuality, making her sudden disappearance very concerning. Both women had not been reachable, and Geraldine's voicemail was full. 3 days had passed, and the gendarmes insisted there was no cause for concern. They argued that Katia and Geraldine had simply gone to a country house to relax, and that their fun may have lasted longer than expected. This dismissive attitude from the police prompted Geraldine's father to reach out to the prosecutor's office to initiate a search, but he received a similarly indifferent response. Frustrated by the lack of action from the authorities, Geraldine's brother decided to conduct his own investigation. Geraldine's family was aware of her friend Venue, although no one had seen Venue yet. Venue and Geraldine met just 2 weeks before she went missing, through a mutual friend, and they quickly became close. Geraldine's family searched for her silver Peugeot 206 on the outskirts of the city, but their efforts were fruitless. A few days later, they made a public appeal through the media. News of Katia and Geraldine's disappearance sparked a strong public reaction, and that attracted the attention of law enforcement. A search operation was launched, and media interest grew, particularly because the case involved well-known individuals. During the initial investigation, police were able to track Katia and Geraldine's mobile phone locations, review their last calls. The last call from Geraldine's phone was made on November 1, 2004, when she contacted a stranger near La Pistole, near a country house. They later discovered that on the evening of November 1, her card was used to withdraw about $260 at 9:50 p.m., shortly after she made her last call. The detectives requested surveillance footage from the ATM to identify who made the withdrawal. Footage shows two young women, resembling Katia and Geraldine, making a cash withdrawal. The next day, November 2, about $72 was withdrawn from Katia's card in Paris. This did not raise suspicion, as she often traveled to Paris for work or shopping. Unfortunately, the footage from that camera could not be obtained. There was also a purchase made at a nearby supermarket. Detectives went to the store and spoke with the cashier. The employee did not clearly remember the two women's faces, but had a vague memory of them making a purchase. The store did not have a security system in place to capture the transaction. The only unusual detail was the receipt, which showed a purchase of cheap beer and spicy snacks. Katia and Geraldine's relatives insisted that none of them bought such things because they had never used them before. If they want to drink alcohol, they will prefer fine wine. It was concerning that they had not contacted their families. The investigation continues, focusing on another supermarket. Detectives reviewed surveillance footage, but found no one resembling Katia and Geraldine. The shopping list had an oddity. A pack of diapers had been purchased, which was unusual since they had no children. Luckily, the cashier remembered that a man had bought diapers. This caused serious concerns, as Katia and Geraldine could not give their cards to a stranger. The cashier reviewed the camera footage and recognized the buyer, although she did not know his name. He was a man of about 40 years old and had a bald spot on his head. Police have a blurry image of the suspect involved in the kidnapping of Katia and Geraldine. His arrest is crucial to finding out how Geraldine and Katia's bank cards ended up in his hands. Luckily for investigators, the man reappeared. His next transaction took place at a gas station. Surveillance cameras captured the incident, showing a man driving a white Peugeot 205. The recordings provide clearer images, revealing part of the license plate. An analysis of the databases yielded 800 matches for that plate in the area, but only 6 were registered as Peugeot 205 cars. Within hours, the search was narrowed down to one specific individual. The man in question was Jean-Pierre Triber. A check of his address revealed that he lived near the ATM where the first transaction occurred, just a few kilometers away. The last signal from Geraldine's phone pointed to his residence, but when the detectives arrived, he was not there. They then go to his workplace and learn that he is currently on vacation. However, detectives confirmed images from the supermarket and gas station showed it was Jean, 44 years old. The office clerk informed the detectives that Jean would be returning to work the next morning. They planned to wait for him at 7:35 a.m. When he drove the white car into the parking lot, they arrested him. He remained calm and did not seem to understand the situation. They quickly confiscated his wallet and discovered that it contained Katia and Geraldine's cards. Jean-Pierre Triber was born on April 8, 1963, in Luza. He was the youngest of 3 children in his family. His father was a war veteran, and his mother was a homemaker. He dropped out of school in the 5th grade and later attended the Agricultural Academy. But he did not graduate due to an eye condition. A failed surgery resulted in him having a half-closed eyelid. He enjoyed hunting and started a tree trimming business, which ultimately failed. He then worked as a forester and later as an agricultural worker. Most recently, he had a job in an office. In 1989, he married a woman who had a child from a previous relationship, and he treated that child as his own. They have a daughter, and he may have bought diapers for her. Jean was quickly arrested. During his initial questioning, he claimed that he had met Katia and Geraldine about a month earlier, when they had given him a lift to another city. However, he later changed his story, stating that he had seen them regularly over the past several months. He also mentioned that the 3 of them had gone bowling and had dinner together several times. this was obviously a lie, as they had only known each other for 2 weeks. As investigators questioned Jean, he began to add more strange details to his story. Eventually, he claimed that Geraldine, Katya had planned their escape and that he had helped them in some way. For example, he said that they gave him their bank cards so that he could freely access their money. He suggested that this was a gesture of thanks, but he never clarified what specific help he had provided. He hid this information from the police, which made his story seem unconvincing, and no one believed him. The investigators searched Jean's house, but found no incriminating evidence. He was arrested because they suspected he was concealing more information. He becomes the prime suspect in a kidnapping or even a double murder. During subsequent questioning, he gave a new story, claiming that he had met Katya and Geraldine in late summer 2004. They would spend time together, despite the fact that Katya and Geraldine did not know each other at the time. The detectives chose not to confront him about this obvious lie, allowing him to continue his narrative. Jean admitted that on November 1, 2004, he and Katya and Geraldine agreed to meet. Geraldine proposed a strange plan to blackmail someone, and all three traveled to Paris, where they intended to visit a bar and wait for a specific person to arrive. The plan involved breaking the window of the person's car and stealing 2 suitcases from inside. Jean plans to deliver the stolen items to Katya and Geraldine. They will then go to another bar together to meet 2 more people and exchange the suitcases. Jean claims that their plan was successful, but then Katya and Geraldine disappear. Although his story was convincing, detectives noticed that he seemed to be fabricating details as he spoke. Upon examining his mobile phone, they discovered inconsistencies in his account. When confronted with these discrepancies, he appeared visibly unsettled. Strangely, he had never been in trouble with the law before, and seemed to be a kind, calm man with his wife and children. However, he was experiencing marital issues and had moved in with his parents during that time. He was struggling financially, relying on temporary jobs until he eventually secured a position in an office. Jean was accused of kidnapping women, theft, and fraud. As a result, the media reported extensively on the investigation, making the details of the case public. Journalists were especially interested because Geraldine is a famous media personality and the daughter of a famous actor. They shared various details about Geraldine's life, attempting to highlight her alleged close relationship with Jean. On December 6, a neighbor of Jean provided new information to the investigators. He reported that on the evening of November 1, he observed Jean working diligently in his garden. The neighbor noted that Jean spent several consecutive days, from November 1 to November 5, engaged in various gardening activities, which he found unusual. He witnessed Jean trimming bushes, removing stumps, and burning debris. This behavior aroused suspicion, leading investigators to search Jean's parents' plots to find the bodies of Katya and Geraldine, along with evidence. On the morning of December 8, 2004, several police vehicles appeared and blocked off the area to conduct a search. Specially trained police dogs also joined the operation. Officers conducted a thorough search of the property and discovered a freshly dug hole resembling a grave. To investigate, they dug approximately half a meter deep until they encountered a tree root. Although the hole was ultimately empty, it appeared to have been prepared for some purpose, likely to conceal bodies. Additionally, the extinguished fire revealed many burned items, including pieces of a mobile phone, scraps of women's clothing, a watch strap, several perfume bottles, and keys. These items were consistent with those belonging to Geraldine. In the barn, they also found an unusual elephant-shaped keychain that Geraldine always kept with her. This evidence linked Jean to the deaths of Katya and Geraldine. To ensure reliable information, it is important to locate the bodies of Katya and Geraldine. The following day, the police continued their search and found a cesspool in the area. They discovered 2 naked bodies, but extracting them proved difficult because they were mostly submerged in sewage, and there was limited space to work. Special equipment was brought in for the extraction process, which took nearly all night. The bodies were identified as Geraldine Giraud and Katia L'Herbier. Detectives quickly observed that their mouths had been stuffed with objects and gagged with duct tape, while their faces were covered with what appeared to be death masks. Jean, the main suspect, requested a lawyer and denied any wrongdoing. He claimed that he did not know how Katia and Geraldine died. However, the prosecutor's office disagreed, believing Jean was either responsible for the double murder or complicit in a horrific crime. After the bodies were found, he changed his story, claiming that Geraldine and Katia had indeed visited him, but were later taken away by 2 men dressed in black. He alleged that the men were involved in a furniture transfer at a bar in Paris, and that he had seen Katia and Geraldine with them before disappearing. The detectives decide to team up with Jean and ask him to create a composite sketch of the individuals dressed in black. In February 2005, he created 2 photographs. Unfortunately, no one was able to identify the individuals in the sketches, rendering them ineffective. By this time, the autopsy results of Katia and Geraldine were available. Due to the poor condition of the bodies, the forensic expert could not determine the exact cause of death. Possible injuries, such as weapon or knife wounds, as well as signs of strangulation, remain inconclusive. The condition of their lungs raised many questions, with suspicions that they may have been poisoned with some kind of gas. The estimated time of death corresponds to the time they went missing. However, the poor state of the bodies made it challenging to pinpoint an exact date. They were likely killed on November 1st and may have been held captive for 2 days, possibly in Jean's house, before he dealt with them. There is no evidence to confirm that he kept them imprisoned in his house. However, his mobile phone provided a clue. He activated it on November 2nd in the hospital parking lot area in Paris, where Geraldine's car was subsequently found. During a thorough search of Jean's home, police discovered a weapon and duct tape similar to the one used to wrap Katia and Geraldine's faces. However, the weapon was not the murder weapon. The investigation shifted back to the theory of gas poisoning. Their underwear was found in Jean's house, and his DNA was discovered on that underwear. Additionally, investigators believe he may have poisoned them with gas or some other poison. Another theory suggested that he could have used a type of food that, if inhaled over an extended period, could also lead to the deaths of Geraldine and Katia. However, Jean's defense team questioned the police's theories. They argued that if he had really killed Katia and Geraldine, he would not have dumped their bodies on his land. Given his familiarity with the surrounding forest, he could have easily hidden them, making it risky to leave the bodies in a place associated with him. Additionally, they found the proposed financial motive to be unlikely. Jean used only a small fraction of the large sum of money on Katia and Geraldine's credit cards. His family also found it hard to believe that he was involved in the murder. However, the prosecutor's office argued that there was a financial motive behind the crimes. By November 2004, he was struggling financially, earning just over $900 a month, barely enough to cover basic needs. He is in dire need of money and sees Katia and Geraldine as potential solutions. When police searched the storage room at his parents' home, they found tape that matched the tape used to wrap Katia and Geraldine's heads. They also discovered a hair on the tape that was believed to be similar to Geraldine's hair. The lawyer objected to this evidence, arguing that the police had only found hair without the necessary follicles for accurate DNA matching, meaning it was impossible to confirm its source. The prosecution faced several troubling questions. On November 26, 2004, an opportunity arose to shed light on these issues. When police arrested Patricia Darboux, Jean's girlfriend, they frequently called and contacted each other. He met Patricia in 2003 and became her friend first, and then her boyfriend. Over time, they spent a lot of time together and began to communicate regularly. During this period, he was financially stable, working as a forester and supporting a family. However, he later attempted to involve Patricia in financial fraud related to illegal activities, specifically the trade of contraband cigarettes. The police discovered that this seemingly modest and honest man had connections to organized crime. He is particularly interested in stolen credit card dealers. Patricia admitted that she got into trouble because of one of his schemes, but he helped her avoid serious consequences. Patricia's testimony revealed that Gene had long-standing ties to the criminal underworld, contradicting claims that he was an innocent man who had recently fallen into a life of crime. In this context, Gene's account is unreliable. He later alleged that he tried to cooperate with Katia and Geraldine in some scheme, but things did not go as planned. The police decided to investigate people close to Gene to gather more information. This investigation lasted for more than 4 years, and they discovered that many of his friends and acquaintances were petty criminals, mainly involved in theft, kidnapping, and fraud. However, none of these individuals knew Katia and Geraldine. It seems that Gene needed help to kill Katia and Geraldine, as it seems he could not do it himself. Eventually, the detectives turned their attention to Geraldine's aunt, Marie Christine Van Kempen, who introduced Katia to Geraldine. Marie was a singer, artist, and voice teacher. At the funeral, Marie acted strangely. Her inconsistent statements to police raised suspicions, as she changed her mind several times. This led to a theory that she might have had a motive for the murders. Perhaps she had a big argument with Katia and Geraldine, which may have caused her to contact Gene for help. Alternatively, there might have been another motive linked to a troubling incident from her past. As a teenager, Marie tried to convince Geraldine that her father had abused her, but this was not true. Geraldine denied this and told her father that Marie had made her say these false things. The reasons behind Marie's actions remain unclear. Marie was later arrested on suspicion of being involved in a murder. Further searches of Marie's home uncovered numerous recordings, leading investigators to suspect that she had a complicated relationship with Geraldine. This raised questions about whether that relationship may have motivated her actions. They also found masks and tape similar to those used to cover Katia and Geraldine's mouths. In particular, there were traces of chloroform on some of the masks. However, her family insists that she is incapable of murder. They believe that the strained relationship between Marie and Katia, Geraldine, stems from each person's personal habits, which make communication difficult. After spending 31 hours in police custody, Marie was released after convincingly explaining the suspicious evidence to the police. A witness also emerged to corroborate her account. They discovered that the chloroform on the masks was actually residue from insecticides left by the apartment's previous owner. As a result, all suspicions against Marie were cleared. Although the prosecutor's office had little evidence against Gene, after 4 years of investigation, the grand jury decided to proceed with trial. The evidence presented by the prosecution faced strong opposition during the preliminary hearings. The judge scheduled the trial for the end of 2009. However, just before the first official hearing in September 2009, Gene escaped from prison. This escape aligned with the profile suggested by psychiatrists, indicating that it was more calculated than the detectives had realized. A week after his escape, he wrote to a close friend, asserting his innocence and claiming that he had been wrongfully imprisoned. He portrayed himself as a victim of a conspiracy, convinced that the actual killers were trying to frame him. In another letter, he described his life in the forest as difficult, but still better than being imprisoned on false charges. For 5 weeks, Gene evaded the entire French police force in a dramatic chase. Finally, a surveillance camera captured his image on a street. Unfortunately for law enforcement, by the time they arrived, he had already escaped again. It was later revealed that he was not living in the forest as he had claimed. Instead, he was staying in the apartment of a friend who was away and unaware of his presence. On November 20, 2009, he was arrested. But after returning to prison, he began to complain again. On February 20, 2010, Jean was found dead in prison. This incident caused further grief to Katya and Geraldine's family, as his death prevented them from learning the truth about Katya and Geraldine's deaths. He has always maintained his innocence, but has tried every way to avoid facing the jury, prosecutors, and judge